Chapter 42, Snow-Covered Bow and Saber. Chapter 42, Snow-Covered Bow and Saber. Su Zimo ran all the way toward the direction of Tsonglang mountain range in the snow. He ran faster and faster, his eyes clear, his gaze steady. Su Zimo had barely shut his eyes and slept for the past half a month. In addition to the fierce battle in the capital, Su Zimo was thoroughly exhausted. Although Su Zimo had the essence that was sealed inside his body by the scarlet flame fruit, it was of no help as he was mentally drained. The next battle was the real test for him. A life or death ordeal. If Su Zimo was an ordinary chi refinement warrior, he would definitely die this time. However, since Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, he was not without any chance of winning. Su Zimo kept thinking about the words that Dayu told him. Demon cultivators are best at skipping levels and killing opponents. Given your capabilities now, although you are not as good as Foundation Establishment cultivators, if you are able to be in their close proximity, you will still be able to instantly kill them. Su Zimo could only rely on close combat. However, the most difficult part was that the cultivators from the Joyful clan already had a taste of his abilities at close combat. They would be on guard, and he would not be given much chance at close combat. Moreover, Su Zimo had no idea about the fighting prowess of the Foundation Establishment cultivators. Was it simply manipulating spirit weapons? He knew that it would not be that simple. Su Zimo ran at his fastest speed, reaching Tsonglang mountain range in no time. Unlike ordinary men, if cultivators wanted to hurry on with one's journey, they would fly in the sky. If they wanted to reach Pingyang town in the shortest time, they needed to pass by the sky above Tsonglang mountain range. Su Zimo would wait here in ambush and kill the Joyful clan cultivators. Su Zimo felt an indescribable familiarity at being back in the Tsonglang mountain range. Here was his main battlefield. Su Zimo found a towering old tree and used his hands and legs to climb up the tree in no time. He was even more agile than the apes. He had to be in a high spot to be able to notice any suspicious activity and to make the first move. Su Zimo had to consider every detail in preparation for the big battle. This was his only way to turn the tide and survive the battle. Su Zimo sat on the old tree. He placed the cold moon saber horizontally in front of his knees, holding the sanguine crystal bow in his hand, and closed his eyes. This was his final chance to rest. The snow was getting heavier. It kept snowing, covering the entire area. Tsonglang mountain range seemed to be covered by a thin layer of white snow. It was crystal clear, a stunning and breathtaking sight. The sanguine crystal bow and cold moon saber were covered with snowflakes. One could no longer tell its original appearance. Su Zimo rested while practicing the breathing and expiration methods of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. His body was heating up while white clouds of vapor rose from the top of his head. Su Zimo's body might be burning, but his heart became colder each second. He exuded a piercing cold and murderous aura. It covered every corner of Tsonglang mountain range. Suddenly, Su Zimo opened his eyes and looked afar. A flock of birds in the forest at the far distance seemed to be given a shock. They spread their wings, soaring to the sky, emitting anxious hooting sounds. They were here. Only 2 hours had passed since Su Zimo reached Tsonglang mountain range. Su Zimo moved slightly and slid down from the old trees, quietly dropping onto the snow. He drew out the last 5 remaining sharp arrows from the quiver with a backhand grip, knocked all of them on the string, and moved stealthily toward the far direction. The spirit vessel was the most common flying spirit weapon in the cultivation world. It was steady, fast, and had a large capacity. One of the spirit vessels of the Joyful clan had entered the sky above Tsonglang mountain range, speeding forward. There were more than 100 people on the spirit vessel. Most of them were level 8 or level 9, or even perfected cultivators. The 5 leading cultivators were Joyful clan elders. 4 of them were early-stage Foundation Establishment, while 1 of them was mid-stage Foundation Establishment. In the Joyful clan, only Foundation Establishment cultivator could be conferred additional titles to be the elder. In order to kill Su Zimo, Joyful Clan had sent almost half of their cultivators out in a hunt for Suzimo. It proved that the Joyful Clan highly valued the operation this time. If the opponent was a cultivator, even if he was a chi refinement warrior, the Joyful Clan would be wary, lest they provoke the clan that the cultivator belonged to. After all, Joyful Clan was just a small clan. Otherwise, it would not have worked with one of the small states like the country of Yin. However, Suzimo was just a mortal. Did he think that he could provoke the clan just because he had a strong physical body and he knew corporal mortification martial arts? If Suzimo remained alive, and the Su family was not annihilated, the Joyful Clan would become a laughingstock in the cultivation world. Elder Chen, Suzimo was terrifying in close combat. All of us dared not come close to him. You must be extra careful. You must not get too close to him. One of the Chi refinement warriors who was next to the elder smiled, trying his best to fawn on the elder and to give him a kind reminder. To his surprise, Elder Chen looked upset and snorted. Is Foundation Establishment Cultivator the same as Chi Refinement Warrior? Do we need you to remind us? Another elder sneered. Not only would Suzimo not be able to get close to us, even if he does, he cannot hurt us. Yes. Elder Gao is very right. The Chi Refinement Warrior looked embarrassed as he plastered a flattering smile on his face. The Chi Refinement Warrior seemed to think of something, but he hesitated and held back his tongue. Say what you want, the only mid-stage Foundation Establishment Cultivator said lightly. The Chi Refinement Warrior seemed to be in a panic, his heart still throbbing with fear. Elder Qian, the man had a sanguine big bow. The arrows that were released from it were very powerful and fast. Although it was not as accurate, if it was within a short distance, it has a high lethality. All of the elders must be careful. Hee. Elder Qian smiled, a look of disdain in his eyes, but he remained silent. Elder Gao gave a loud laugh. All of you are a bunch of useless fools. As Chi Refinement Warriors, how can you be frightened by the bow and arrow of a mere mortal? You have shamed the clan. When we see him later, he could shoot as he likes. I will show you how I destroy his sharp arrows. Elder Gao was still laughing when a figure appeared at the old tree in front of the spirit vessel, holding a sanguine big bow in his hands. Bow like a full moon, and the arrows were ready. There is a murderous aura. Initially, Elder Qian assumed a lotus position on the spirit vessel. However, he was startled, and he slapped his hands on the storage bag, and a talisman landed on his palm. He squashed it and shouted loudly, "Be careful!" Swoosh! There was a loud sound of arrows piercing through the air. 5 sharp arrows glittered, and it reached the Joyful Clan cultivators in no time. The 5 Joyful Clan elders bore the brunt of it. Elder Qian reacted very quickly. Just when Elder Qian squashed the talisman, he also squashed a talisman, and he was shrouded by a sparkling light. The other 2 elders unsheathed their flying swords, blocking horizontally in front of them. Elder Gao was the only one who was still laughing wantonly. He was slow to react, and there was a shock in his eyes. The cold light grew larger and larger in Elder Gao's pupil. Poof! A black light hit directly into the chest, coming out through the body, blood bursting out from Elder Gao's body. Although the arrow did not hit the heart, the terrifying power that came with it tore the wound open and destroyed all chances of survival for Elder Gao. Elder Gao stood motionless on the spirit vessel, blood spewing from his chest and mouth. There was a look of regret and blankness in his eyes. He muttered softly, "The arrow is so fast. Foundation Establishment, dead?" Chapter 43. Flee with all his might. Chapter 43. Flee with all his might. Having lived in Songlang mountain range for 1 year, Suzimo gained a deeper understanding on fighting. There were many factors affecting a fight. One's ability was the most basic factor, but not the only one. Weather, mindset, environment, preparation, and various details could also change the circumstance and even affect the trend of the eventual victory. On this occasion, advanced preparation and the weather were Suzimo's advantages. One party was totally unprepared while the other party had long been waiting. Coupled with the heavy snow flying and blocking one's views, there was low visual acuity. When the cultivators from Joyful Clan came to their senses, 5 sharp arrows had already appeared before their eyes. Clang, 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 clang. Out of the 5 arrows, 2 of them hit the respective glowing shields of 2 Joyful Clan elders. The glowing shield vibrated a little, and the sharp arrows bounced off them. The other 2 arrows had been blocked by the flying swords unsheathed by 2 Joyful Clan elders. However, the arrow that shot Elder Gao resulted in devastating damage to many cultivators from Joyful Clan. Caught off guard, Elder Gao, who was an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, was killed with 1 arrow. Seemingly, this arrow's power did not weaken as it continued to shoot through the air. The spirit vessel was not large. Over 100 Chi refinement warriors were divided into 5 rows as they stood behind the 5 elders, and there were 20 Chi refinement warriors standing behind Elder Gao. Even the Foundation establishment cultivator did not react in time, much less the Chi refinement warriors behind them. The 20 Chi refinement warriors felt piercing pains in their hearts even before sighting this sharp arrow. As the vitality in their body drained rapidly, their eyes dimmed and they fell off the spirit vessel. This arrow was too powerful. After piercing through the flesh and blood of 21 cultivators, it still had some strength left. It ended up on a towering old tree with its tail shaking and swaying vigorously. An entire group of 21 cultivators, including 1 Foundation establishment cultivator, were killed by 1 arrow shot by Su Zimo. That's him. It's Su Zimo. The few Chi refinement warriors on the spirit vessel recognized Su Zimo and yelled loudly, "Retreat the spirit vessel. Surround and kill this man." Enraged, Elder Qian hollered harshly. Although this arrow did not hurt the other 4 Foundation establishment cultivators, they could still feel the fear in their hearts. If they were to react slower by a bit, they would already be a corpse. Swash, swash, swash. Many Chi refinement warriors on the spirit vessel rose to the sky, unsheathed their spirit weapons, and attacked Su Zimo at the same time. In a split second, successive flashes of light appeared in mid-air. It was dazzling and eye-catching. Sword auras traveled through the wind and snow like frost, engulfing the heaven and earth. Of course, Su Zimo did not think that he had the capability to contend with a clan. He was already very lucky that the earlier arrow could kill the Foundation establishment cultivator. After shooting out 5 arrows, Su Zimo immediately fled as far as possible without hesitating. Gee! 2 Joyful Clan elders attacked simultaneously. There was a flash of light on each of the flying swords as they suddenly charged towards the back of Su Zimo's head at lightning speed. Even before the sword reached him, Su Zimo could feel his scalp exploding. A surge of bone-chilling coldness penetrated his body. I can't fight head-on. Su Zimo realized that he would still be gravely wounded if he were to erupt all his energy to block the flying swords of the Foundation establishment cultivators. Elder Chen unsheathed a long cloth from the storage bag and held it towards the direction of the wind. On the rectangular-shaped cloth was an eerie picture of something that looked like a fearsome ghost. All of a sudden, there was a flash of light on the long cloth. That fearsome ghost suddenly opened its eyes and stared at Su Zimo ferociously, giving him goosebumps on the scalp. Su Zimo felt dizzy. His eyes blurred, and he began to feel a little dazed. He shuddered in his heart and dared not look at it again. Biting the tip of his tongue, he tried to maintain soberness as he dashed forward continuously, weaving and moving in the forest, and dodging the numerous spirit weapons constantly piercing at him from behind. It was only now that Su Zimo truly experienced the change that spirit perception had brought to him. Honestly, spirit perception's usefulness was not that apparent during one-to-one fights with cultivators. However, under such successive attacks with lights filling the air and dazzling the eyes, swords and sabers clashing, penetrating gold and splitting rocks, one's sight and hearing would be greatly affected. Even if Su Zimo could see the flying sword coming over, it would be too late for him to dodge it. Nevertheless, spirit perception was different. It could sense and avert danger without even looking or listening. Su Zimo did not need to look or listen. He relied completely on an incredible instinct that was beyond description while traversing through successive flashes of swords and shadows and fleeing for his life. Earlier on, Suzimo shot out 5 arrows at once because he realized that the other party might not give him another chance to shoot any arrows once the fight began. True enough. The attacks were raining on Suzimo like raging storms and a devastating downpour. He would be instantly killed on the spot if he were to pause momentarily, let alone shoot an arrow. Ooh, ooh. Terrifying sounds that stirred the souls could be heard. Suzimo's heart suddenly leaped. He had to force himself to stop charging forward. He then flipped his hand, unsheathed the cold moon saber, turned back and blocked off the dozens of flying swords piercing towards him. Riding on the forces from the flying sword, he tilted his body, fell on one side, and rolled on the ground. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Out of the corner of his eye, Suzimo saw a ring-shaped spirit weapon smashing on the ground, creating a huge pit about 3 inches from the earlier spot where he paused his steps. If he had moved just half a step forward earlier, his entire body would have exploded upon the impact of this spirit weapon. Suzimo took a closer look and saw 2 spirit patterns shining on this ring-shaped spirit weapon. It was a middle-grade spirit weapon. Seeing that Suzimo had dodged the sure-kill move that he had been waiting for, Elder Qian sneered coldly. He redirected the ring-shaped spirit weapon towards Suzimo to kill the latter again. Suzimo crawled with both his arms and legs, moving close to the ground. His body was as flexible and agile as a python as he slithered across the snow, leaving behind a curvaceous trail. The flying sword was about to pierce Suzimo. Yet, Suzimo twisted his body in an eerie manner and dodged the attack just in time, never decreasing his speed at any point in time. The fury in many cultivators' hearts intensified, and they attacked even more viciously. Bang! 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 The spirit weapons came to nothing and smashed onto the ground countless times after brushing shoulders with Suzimo. Suzimo felt slight pangs of pain on his body as raging sandstones hit him. Suzimo pursed his lips tightly. He looked calm as he gritted his teeth and hung on. The cultivators from Joyful Clan had never seen such movement techniques. He was alternating and interchanging between movements of a galloping horse, a swinging ape, and a swathing python with extreme ease. Suzimo's physique was completely beyond the comprehension of the numerous cultivators. Even spirit beasts who were known for their strong and powerful bodies definitely could not achieve this. Lad, you have to die today. I'll see where you can escape to. Elder Qian hollered furiously, waving the long cloth in his hands. The fearsome ghost on it opened its mouth and released a cloud of black mist. Who would have expected that due to strong winds and heavy snow, just as the black mist was surging out, it was dissipated by the wind and snow and then reversed towards the direction of the Qi Refinement Warriors from Joyful Clan instead. Many Qi Refinement Warriors were caught off guard and stained by the black mist. All of a sudden, their complexions turned purplish-blue and foreheads blackened. They lost their balance in the air and were about to fall. Everyone hurriedly searched out an elixir from his storage bag and swallowed it before the poison gradually eased. Although Elder Qian's spirit cloth was only an inferior-grade spirit weapon, it could influence the opponent's mind and heart. The black mist that it released earlier was its trump card. If mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were slightly distracted, they would also suffer big time. Never did Elder Qian expect that his trump card would not injure Suzimo, but instead caused chaos on his own side. At the sight of this, Elder Qian hollered angrily, "What a fool! Put away that lousy cloth of yours and chase this lad properly. He can't hang on for too long." Elder Qian had an ugly look on his old face. He blamed it all on Suzimo, and the murderous intent in his heart intensified. Chapter 44, Perfect Ambush. Chapter 44, Perfect Ambush. The Joyful Clan was in utter chaos. Suzimo felt energized. He leaped up and charged diagonally, rampaging forward with the divine steed-fleeting movement technique. Elder Qian and the group hurried and chased after him. At a place not far away in front, stood a precipitous hilltop. The eyes of Elder Qian and the group shone. Su Zimo did not know flying techniques. He would have to make a detour in order to pass through this hilltop. As such, they could make use of this opportunity to round him up. They might even capture him alive. However, everyone from the Joyful clan could not understand why Su Zimo neither reduced his speed nor changed his direction. Instead, he charged straight towards the hilltop in front of them. Perhaps this man is looking for his own death? He wishes to kill himself in the collision? Muttered a Qi refinement warrior. Just as he finished his words, Elder Chen exclaimed in puzzlement. Before Su Zimo's figure reached the hilltop, strangely, he disappeared. The Joyful clan people rushed forward to take a closer look. It turned out that there was a cave at the foot of this hill. It was quiet, dark, and deep inside the cave. A fearsome beast was seemingly bending over the ground with its big, predacious mouth opened and waiting for everyone from Joyful clan to enter it. Su Zimo actually escaped into this cave. The cave was dark and sinister, narrow and small. Be it Qi refinement warrior or foundation establishment cultivator, they could not fly in the air. This meant that the Joyful clan would not have any upper hand or advantages. On the other hand, Su Zimo turned extremely dangerous and could even possibly slay them. All of a sudden, a layer of haze engulfed the hearts of everyone from Joyful clan. It was originally a sure victory, but for some unknown reason, everyone had a hunch that they had been led around by the nose. To chase or not? If they were to chase him, how should they do it? These two doubts flashed across everyone's minds. If this cave had a dead end, that would be the best scenario. Everyone could just guard at the cave's entrance and Su Zimo would die of starvation inside. However, if this was just a tunnel in the hilltop, Su Zimo would have long escaped when the Joyful clan stayed put to guard the entrance. This was the most tricky part. If the cave had an exit, the people from Joyful clan did not even know where it was. If they were to go their separate ways, it would be very easy for Su Zimo to attack and destroy them. However, if they looked for the exit together but headed towards the wrong direction, Su Zimo would have long escaped without a trace. Damn, this inferior commoner. Elder Qian was boiling with fury, and he clenched his teeth and scolded. Elder Qian pondered deeply for a moment before gritting his teeth and saying, "Chase." After pausing for a while, Elder Qian said again, "Chun Bin, we have talismans to protect us. Even if Su Zimo closes in on us, he won't be able to break both of our defenses. We will lead the group and guard Gong Liangjing and Lu Wancheng well." Gong Liangjing and Lu Wancheng were the other two elders of Joyful clan. Although they were foundation establishment cultivators, they did not have any talismans. The weapons that they controlled were also inferior grade ones. In the cultivation world, it was common for foundation establishment cultivators to do without talismans and control inferior grade spirit weapons, especially small clans such as Joyful clan. This was also the reason why Elixir Refinement Master, Weapon Refinement Master, and Array Formation Master had special statuses in the cultivation world. If the Weapon Refinement Master could refine middle-grade spirit weapons, many foundation establishment cultivators would have worn out their doorsteps to make friends or exchange spirit stones for their services. With a layer of glowing shield on both Elder Qian and Elder Chun, they entered the cave first. Right on the heels of them were the rest of the Joyful clan. The grounds in the cave were uneven and full of bumps and hollows. The Qi refinement warriors had many treasures in their storage bags, but they could not light up the place. They could only rely on the faint glow from the protection talisman on Elder Qian and Elder Chen to move quickly forward. The rest of Joyful clan following behind the elders were ghastly pale. Everyone was high-strung as they surveyed the surroundings, for the fear that Su Zimo would suddenly jump out and catch them off guard. Although Gong Liangjing and Lu Wancheng were foundation establishment cultivators, their palms were also drenched in sweat. They were treading in the cave with fear and trepidation. The atmosphere was getting increasingly stifling. Each time there was a slight movement of grass or wind in the cave, it would cause a commotion among the crowd. Elder Qian and Elder Chun were leading the group at the front. They first observed what was below their feet, followed by what was before them, but did not look up at all. Under everyone's subconscious mind, Zimo did not know flying techniques. Naturally, it was impossible for him to appear from the top of their heads. However, they had forgotten one point. This was a cave. There were stone walls on the ceiling of the cave. At this moment, someone was attaching himself closely to the stone wall on the ceiling, narrowing his eyes and staring coldly at the people of Joyful Clan who were striding below him. Suddenly, Elder Qian paused his steps and said in a low voice, "Something is amiss. There is a stench of blood, and it's very strong. This lad is nearby." Before he could finish his words, a flash of blinding light broke the darkness in the cave. Poof! A large skull flung off, splashing fresh blood all over the crowd. Everyone from Joyful Clan suddenly exploded in shock. Elder Lu? Elder Lu is dead. Where is he? At the top. There was another miserable scream. One of the Qi refinement warriors died on the spot. Prior to this, Zimo once shot out 5 arrows and managed to find out which 2 of these remaining 4 Foundation Establishment Cultivator had defensive tactics similar to the Augmentation Talisman. With his current capability, he could not break such defenses at all. Hence, this slash of Zimo's were aimed at Lu Wanqing and Gong Liangjing, who did not have the talisman to protect them. However, Gong Liangjing was more alert. At that instant when Elder Qian paused his steps, he realized that something was not quite right. Hence, he bent down without a care about his pride. As such, he avoided a calamity. When Zimo dropped from the stone ceiling and wanted to chase after him, Gong Liangjing had already ran behind Elder Qian and Elder Chun and broke out in a cold sweat. At this very moment, Zimo landed in the crowd of Qi refinement warriors. In the narrow and small cave, the Qi refinement warriors from Joyful Clan barely had any space to dodge. In his panic, someone even bumped into Zimo when he was trying to flee. Zimo's sinister and cold laughter resonated in the dark. "Ha ha ha ha! You wish to kill me? Such a small number of people is not enough." Poof, poof, poof. Zimo did not even need to look. With the cold moon saber in his hands, he could slay the Qi refinement warriors on sight easily with any casual wave of his saber. Along with the miserable screams of Qi refinement warriors, flashes of blood appeared constantly as they splattered everywhere. In this cave, Zimo was like a tiger moving into a herd of sheep, chopping those on the left and slashing those on the right, going on a rampage. The Qi refinement warriors from Joyful Clan could not retaliate at all. Even escaping was wishful thinking. This was an ambush targeted at the Joyful Clan that could be described as perfect. Zimo made use of his familiarity with the Zhonglang mountain range terrain to successfully lure the other party into the deep, dark, and quiet cave. The cultivator's advantages were minimized, whereas Zimo's merits were unleashed to the maximum. The 3 elders of Joyful Clan stood rooted to the ground, perspiring on their foreheads, but did not make any moves. It was not because they did not want to. It was because Zimo had been moving about in the crowd continuously. His movement techniques were swift and agile. The cave was already very dim. Once they attacked, they would definitely injure their own clan disciples by mistake. At the sight of the decreasing number of clan disciples, viciousness flashed across Elder Qian's eyes. He said in a low voice, "Attack." "What?" The other 2 elders were stunned. "I said attack." Elder Qian said coldly, "We can't worry so much now. Even if we kill our clan disciples by mistake, it is better than letting all of them die in this lad's hands." Chapter 45, On the Brink of Death. Chapter 45, On the Brink of Death. In the darkness, the 3 elders from Joyful Clan wore capricious expressions. Simultaneously, the trio unsheathed their spirit weapons. There were 2 inferior-grade weapons and 1 middle-grade one. Swash, swash, swash. The spirit weapons shone brightly, exuding cold and sinister murderous intents and charging forward. Poof, poof. 2 clan disciples from the Joyful Clan were unprepared and killed on the spot by the spirit weapons of the Elder Qian trio. Unabated, the spirit weapons continued to charge at the vital points on Zimo's body. In the small and narrow cave, The people from Joyful Clan barely had any space to avoid the attacks. Nevertheless, this also meant that Su Zimo's movements would be greatly restricted. Su Zimo did not expect the three elders of the Joyful Clan to be so ferocious and merciless. They actually attacked forcefully without caring about the safety of their clan disciples. Su Zimo tilted his head and averted the ring-shaped sword weapon, which was the greatest threat to him. He lowered his body and dodged a flying sword. Using a reverse grip on his saber, he slashed all the Chi Refinement warriors in front of him. Poof! At the same time, a dot of cold light suddenly appeared on this Chi Refinement warrior's chest. Another flying sword came out from this person's chest and pierced towards Su Zimo's throat. It was too close. Given the distance, Su Zimo could not avoid it at all. Su Zimo retracted the cold moon saber and then blocked the flying sword. Clang! Clashing sounds of sword and saber could be heard and sparks flew everywhere. Su Zimo's entire body had taken a huge blow. His perlicue split upon the impact and blood was spilling out from it. The cold moon saber was almost flung out of his hands. Since both parties started fighting, Su Zimo had been trying to avoid a direct confrontation with the Foundation establishment cultivators. As expected, the power of the flying swords controlled by the Foundation establishment cultivators was definitely not something that his body could endure. Su Zimo's entire right arm felt numb. He could not exert any strength at that point in time. The inferior-grade spirit weapon directed by an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was already so powerful. If Su Zimo were to forcefully receive Elder Qian's ring-shaped middle-grade spirit weapon, he feared he would become paralyzed on the spot. Of course, this slash of Su Zimo's was not completely useless. Elder Qian's flying sword should have pierced Su Zimo's chest, but due to colliding with the cold moon saber, it deviated slightly and penetrated Su Zimo's scapular region, splattering fresh blood everywhere. This was Su Zimo's first injury since the start of the fight. The piercing pain in his shoulder region was unbearable, and he could no longer use his left arm. It is so powerful. Su Zimo was secretly astonished. Su Zimo could escape without the slightest bit of injury when he fought perfected Chi Refinement warriors head-on. However, the power of early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators had crossed into a different level. Fortunately, although Su Zimo's right arm felt numb, it did not suffer too huge a blow. After resting for a while, he could still continue with the fight. Su Zimo no longer dared to remain in this place. He turned, used Mountain Reliance to send the few Chi Refinement warriors who blocked his way flying, executed movement techniques and dashed towards the outside of the cave. Su Zimo was unaware that, at this very moment, the Elder Qian trio were feeling even more stunned, their faces full of disbelief. He didn't die. He actually blocked Elder Qian's sword? How is that possible? He is actually still alive and jumping, and has the energy to escape outside? Elder Qian decisively shouted, "Hurry up and chase him. This lad is injured and can't run too far away." The three elders followed after Su Zimo first while the remaining Chi Refinement warriors from Joyful Clan hurried over. They really did not wish to stay any longer in this cave. Before entering the cave, there were still more than 80 Chi Refinement warriors. Now, there were only about 50 Chi Refinement warriors left. Most of them died in Su Zimo's hands, and a few in the hands of the clan elders. In fact, everyone was aware in their hearts that, no matter the outcome, the Joyful Clan had already lost. 5 Foundation establishment cultivators had led about 100 Chi Refinement warriors to chase after a mortal. That was almost half the strength of the clan. Yet, half of the forces were killed. 2 elders were dead. The remaining Chi Refinement warriors were still badly shaken, terrified and wondering what happened. "We have to kill him." Elder Qian clenched his teeth and said with a sinister and gloomy expression. Elder Chen revealed a ferocious expression and said viciously, "It will be best if we can capture him alive. I want to make him suffer endless tortures for the rest of his life, and then crush this lad's bones into ashes and chop his corpse into 10,000 pieces. We can't let the Su family off too. We will ensure that their blood flows like a river, and even the fowls and dogs will not be spared." Gong Liangjing said coldly. Everyone from Joyful Clan chased after Su Zimo. Although it was still snowing heavily outside, it was spacious and open. They had finally got rid of the suffocating pressure felt inside the cave. Over there, Elder Qian pointed to a place in front. Not far away, Su Zimo was dashing continuously, holding onto his left arm, dripping blood and appearing extremely eye-catching on the snowy ground. Chase! Everyone from Joyful Clan rose to the sky and charged forward. Brother Qian, the spirit Qi on the protection talisman can't hold on for too long. We have to subdue this lad as soon as possible. Elder Qian said in a low voice. Once the protection talismans lose their effect, our lives will also be in danger. Once the talisman was released, it could not be effective all the time. After sustaining itself for a period of time, it would lose its effect when the spirit Qi on it dissipated. Elder Qian had such a protection talisman on him. Once the effect was gone, he would be no different from Gong Liangjing. If he were to encounter the same situation in the cave, it would be hard for him to escape death. Elder Qian nodded. In fact, he had another protection talisman in his storage bag. However, protection talismans were very precious, and he did not wish to waste it. Elder Qian stepped onto the flying sword, clasped both hands, and muttered a sutra. In the wind and snow, as if they had been summoned, a mysterious flow of energy suddenly surged into Elder Qian's fingertips. Ground caving skill. Elder Qian suddenly pointed to the direction in which Su Zimo was escaping. Long before this, Su Zimo had sensed a wave of trepidation in his heart. Upon hearing Elder Qian's voice, he quickly paused his steps. Boom! The ground right in front of Su Zimo seemed to have suffered a powerful impact. It suddenly collapsed, and a huge pit appeared. If Su Zimo was unprepared and his legs wobbled, he would have fallen directly into this deep pit. What is this? Su Zimo's eyes were alternating between shock and puzzlement. He had already foreseen that Foundation establishment cultivators would have some mysterious means, but the scene before him was truly beyond his knowledge. Vinewood twining skill. In that split second that Su Zimo was distracted, another sound rang in his ears. MMM? Su Zimo was stunned, and he secretly cursed. He wanted to go around the huge pit in front of him and run towards the other side. Unexpectedly, just as Su Zimo got up, a few withered branches and vines suddenly crept up from the snow below his feet and ensnared both his legs. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Sounds of spirit weapons breaking through the air could be heard. It was terrifying and soul-stirring. At this moment, Su Zimo's body was restrained, and he could not move or dodge. Once he was hit by the spirit weapon, he would die instantly. Su Zimo remained calm in the face of danger. He dropped to the ground directly, reverse-gripped the cold moon saber, and slashed hard on the vines holding both his feet. Snap! The vines broke. At the same time, spirit weapons successively appeared before him. Su Zimo clenched his teeth, twisted his body till the limit and contracted his large tendons. Crisp and cracking sounds could be heard coming from the bones in his body. He had an extremely close shave with the 3 spirit weapons from the Joyful Clan elders. After successfully dodging the 3 spirit weapons, no matter how, Su Zimo could not avert the over 50 other spirit weapons that were coming towards him. Although all of them were from Qi Refinement Warriors, more than 50 Qi Refinement Warriors attacked at the same time. Hence, this was a frightening force not to be underestimated. All of a sudden, the situation became extremely dangerous and Su Zimo was on the brink of death. Chapter 46. The Spirit Monkey Appears. Chapter 46. The Spirit Monkey Appears. He had no choice but to fight head-on. In a split second, Su Zimo circulated body petrification. His entire body muscles tightened. Large tendons pulsated, and he unleashed his strength to the maximum. Holding the saber in one hand, he swiftly drew an arc in front of him. There were numerous flashes of saber shadows and icy cold lights. Clang, clang, clang. Spirit weapons continuously clashed in the shadows of the sabers in front of Su Zimo. Successive sounds of weapons clashing with one another could be heard. Sparks were flying everywhere. Suzimo's steps were clumsy, and he retreated continuously. There was a sweet taste in his throat as he held a pool of blood in his mouth, refusing to spit it out. Suzimo gritted his teeth and endured. Once he released this breath, he would instantly lose his life. Bang! Suzimo's body landed heavily on a huge pit not far away, his mouth vomiting fresh blood. He lost his grip on the cold moon saber, and his palms were mangled and trembling. Although he had blocked the attack of more than 50 chi refinement warriors, Suzimo was gravely injured. Under such powerful and intensive blows, Suzimo's body crumbled. He was covered in cuts and his green robe drenched in blood. Snowflakes that dropped onto Suzimo's body were instantly melted by his body warmth. Suzimo was ghastly pale. He murmured a little before struggling to sit up. However, he only felt his tendons and bones about to break, and piercing and intensive pain constantly stimulating his brain. Under such aggravating conditions, Suzimo's body shivered and twitched uncontrollably. Everyone from the Joyful clan surrounded the huge pit and looked at Suzimo from the sky. Their eyes were full of excitement, mingled with some fear and reservation. Finally, this person was going to die. Everyone actually felt relieved of a huge burden. If they were to continue with the chase and this person hid in another cave, everyone including Elder Qian dared not guarantee that they would be courageous enough to enter it. The Elder Qian trio had been in the cultivation world for more than 10 years and had gone through many life and death battles with cultivators. However, they had never encountered someone who was so difficult to deal with. The most terrifying thing was that this person was not a cultivator but a mortal without any spirit chi. Ha 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 ha. Suzimo started laughing. Each time he laughed, more fresh blood would spill out from his mouth, making one's flesh creep. At the sound of Suzimo's laughter, many chi refinement warriors felt chills down their spine. Damn, he's really a madman. Some chi refinement warriors cursed in a low voice. Gongliangjing was having goosebumps from Suzimo's laughter. His face dimmed and he said coldly, "I'll go and kill him." Having said that, Gongliangjing unsheathed his flying sword, wanting to cut off Suzimo's head. Wait a minute. Elder Chun stopped Gongliangjing and sneered. He looks half dead. Are you still afraid that he will escape? We'll spare his life first, then bring him back to the clan and give him a good round of torture. We'll make sure that he begs for death. What are you laughing at? At this juncture, Elder Qian suddenly asked. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Suzimo. Hee. There was a flash of mockery in Suzimo's eyes. Tilting his head, he spat out a mouthful of blood, raised his brows and said, "Do you really think that you will surely win? Mark my words. Songlang Mountain Range will be your tomb." Just as he finished his words, he gave out a deep and deafening roar. Sanguine Ape Transformation. The Sanguine Ape Transformation was the last style of the Sanguine Ape Tri-style. In Daiyu's words, this style was the essence and also a forbidden skill that could not be used unless one was on the brink of death. Suzimo rampantly circulated the incantation of Sanguine Ape Transformation and constantly did breathing and expiration. If he did not use this style at this juncture, he would no longer have any chance to do so. At the sound of the 3 words, Sanguine Ape Transformation, everyone from Joyful Clan jumped in shock. Elder Qian and Trio shuddered and moved a step back instinctively. Everyone's expression was grave as they fixed their gazes at the Suzimo in the deep pit, preparing to attack at any point in time. However, after about 10 moments of breath, Suzimo was still sitting in the pit, looking expressionless and still. Nothing changed. Suzimo's heart sank deeply to the bottom. How could this be? After circulating the Heart Sutra of Sanguine Ape Transformation, there was no change to his body. Suzimo could still feel the pain from the various parts of his body. He felt drained and listless. Previously, when he was rounded up by the wolf packs, Suzimo had just cultivated Tendon's transformation and was not qualified to release Sanguine Ape Transformation. Now, Suzimo had already begun cultivating the bone strengthening section. Why did nothing happen when he circulated the Heart Sutra and incantation for Sanguine Ape transformation? This was Su Zimo's last trump card. In the end, he discovered that he could not use this trump card when he took it out. As the Sanguine Ape transformation was a forbidden skill, Su Zimo had never released it before. This was his first time. Su Zimo's first reaction was that he did not cultivate it correctly. Something must have gone wrong somewhere. Su Zimo racked his brains and tried to figure out this puzzle. However, this was not the cultivation field and Dai Yu was not beside him. Instead, a group of cultivators full of murderous intent in their eyes were staring at him ferociously. No one would help him clear his doubts, and the other party would not give him that much time. After waiting for a while, everyone from the Joyful clan discovered that they could not find the slightest bit of change on Su Zimo. They had been tricked. Everyone was enraged. Damn, this inferior commoner can still think of fooling us. One Chi refinement warrior cursed and scolded loudly. Kill him. Kill him. Everyone was aggravated, and many Chi refinement warriors were shouting above him. Almost everyone had their attention on Su Zimo, but no one noticed that, in the forest behind them, amidst the wind and snow, a tall and huge figure was swinging on the tree branches and approaching them at lightning speed. Eyes flickering with flashes of blood, his murderous intent was strong. MMM? Su Zimo exclaimed in puzzlement. He suddenly smelled a familiar and pungent odor and looked up instinctively. Right behind everyone from Joyful Clan, a tall and huge figure leaped down from the towering old tree, dropping from the sky with a furor. Holding an alloy steel rod in one hand, it was swinging it towards the Chi refinement warriors in front of him. Poof, poof, poof. The skulls of a total of 5 Chi refinement warriors were smashed by this rod. Their brains split, and their headless corpses fell into the pit. Spirit beast. It's a spirit beast. Be careful, everyone. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. Damn monkey. Su Zimo rejoiced greatly in his heart. The big and tall figure that rushed here to help was none other than the spirit monkey whom Su Zimo had lived together with for 6 months in Songlang Mountain Range. The alloy steel rod in the spirit monkey's hands was the inferior-grade spirit weapon left behind by that Joyful Clan Chi refinement warrior who died in Su Zimo's hands previously. He did not know when the spirit monkey picked it up to become its weapon. Just as the joy in Su Zimo's heart rose, it completely turned into worries. Although the spirit monkey was powerful, he could only defeat the Chi refinement warriors. After all, it had not advanced to the realm of a spirit demon. Furthermore, the spirit monkey had the same weakness as Su Zimo. It could not fly in the sky. At the thought of this, Su Zimo hollered, "Damn monkey, quickly scram." Jie, Jie. The spirit monkey opened its mouth and laughed, seemingly oblivious to Su Zimo's shout. After killing all 5 Chi refinement warriors at once with one hit from the rod, it did not pause as it leaped into the pit, grabbed Su Zimo, and carried the latter on its back. Thereafter, it tried to escape out of the pit without even turning its back. The spirit monkey was very smart. Although he could not differentiate the realms that the cultivators were at, it knew how to assess the situation. Since Su Zimo had been beaten up so badly to the point of no escape, he was definitely not their match. Hence, the spirit monkey's first thought was not to forcefully fight with the Joyful Clan, but to bring Su Zimo out of the place. Chapter 47. Landed in a desperate situation. Chapter 47. Landed in a desperate situation. Which bastard dares to wreck the important matter of my Joyful Clan? Elder Qian was instantly enraged. After a moment of distraction, he leaped onto the flying sword in the sky and led everyone from the Joyful Clan to chase after them. Flashes of lights streaked across the sky. Elder Qian's face was ghastly pale as he glared at Elder Qian, clenched his teeth and scolded, "Look at your jinxed mouth." Earlier on, Elder Qian had just said that it was impossible for Su Zimo to escape given the latter's grave injuries. In the end, an unknown spirit monkey sprang out of nowhere and killed a few of the clan disciples. It even saved and took Suzimo away. Elderchen wore an innocent expression. For the sake of chasing and killing this Suzimo, Elderchen had already been scolded harshly by Elderchen twice. He was also enduring a belly full of anger and had nowhere to vent his frustration. Elderchen looked at the spirit monkey who was dashing far ahead. His eyes filled with resentment and malice. He said coldly, "This bastard's speed is not fast. It can't run for too long." Similar to what happened 6 months ago when Suzimo was surrounded by the wolf packs, at a time when he faced critical danger, it was the spirit monkey who stood up for him and saved him from the doors of hell. However, the situation this time was different from that 6 years ago. The spirit monkey was clever at ascending hills and adept at climbing rocks. It could also leap and swing with extreme ease in the forest. However, speed was not its forte. Furthermore, the spirit monkey was carrying someone on his back. Suzimo made use of environment, terrain, and external factors to cause the Joyful clan to suffer heavy casualties. However, these factors also made it very hard for the spirit monkey to steer away from the Joyful clan's line of sight. These external factors were a double-edged sword. It could benefit both the self and the enemy. It was the beginning of winter and heavy snow was falling. Although the withered trees were still around, they were barren. Without the green, luxuriant forest and camouflage of thick, dense branches and leaves, the trails left behind by the spirit monkey's escape were visible with one glance. Suzimo felt listless all over. He leaned on the spirit monkey's back and listened to the winds howling by his ears. His heart was full of sorrow and misery as he said in a low voice, "Damn monkey, we can't escape. Put me down and leave on your own." The spirit monkey did not utter a sound. Streams of mist surging out from its nostrils, it dashed forward continuously, sweating profusely. Obviously, it was already using all its might and exhausting a lot of energy. The sounds of clothes flapping in the air were coming closer and closer. The speed of the Chi Refinement Warrior's sword kinesis flight was obviously much faster than that of the spirit monkey. Suzimo sighed gently, "Monkey, these people only want to kill me. Put me down, and you still have hopes of escaping. Otherwise, if we continue like this, they will catch up with us in less than 15 minutes. We will both die here." The spirit monkey continued to keep mum. His expression was obstinate and his gaze sharp. He stubbornly dashed ahead. Suzimo clenched his teeth and punched the spirit monkey's shoulders harshly. He said loudly, "Leave me alone and only one of us will die. If you take me along, both of us will die. This is such a simple logic. Why can't you understand? Why can't you understand? Damn monkey, aren't you very smart and quick-witted? You've become a fool. Quickly scram." Roar, roar. The eyes of the spirit monkey reddened. It suddenly roared loudly, shaking the heaven and earth. Upon the impact, snowflakes on the surrounding old trees fell one after another. The Joyful clan group, following closely behind, were shocked at the sudden roar from the spirit monkey. Fear? Furor? Or hopelessness? They did not know. However, Suzimo understood. Yours truly wants to do so. It's none of your business. This was the spirit monkey's response to him. The spirit monkey was not stupid. From the moment that it saved Suzimo, it already knew that they would possibly die here. However, the spirit monkey still saved him. 6 months ago, the spirit monkey saved Suzimo because of its enmity with the wolf clan. 6 months later, the spirit monkey saved Suzimo because it saw him as his buddy, a buddy that he could share weals and woes with and live and die together. This was the chemistry between a man and a monkey. There was telepathy without the need to communicate in words. Suzimo was silent for a while. He then laughed. Ha 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 ha. Suzimo laughed heartily. The Joyful clan group looked puzzled. They did not understand why Suzimo could still laugh, and in such a hearty and happy manner. Their hearts were already numb, and they could not understand the friendship between Suzimo and the spirit monkey. In the eyes of everyone, the spirit monkey was basically a beast that had not attained spirit intellect, and Suzimo was a man struggling on his deathbed. However, The more Suzumo laughed happily, the angrier they felt. Attack! Elder Qian gave orders. Many flying swords tore the wind and snow and dashed towards them, filling the air. With just a bit of effort, and the distance between the two parties had closed so much, they were already within the joyful clan group's geographical scope of attack. The spirit monkey ran left and swung right, bending its body at one point and leaping at another. It dodged the attacks with all its might. Poof! Flashes of blood appeared. The spirit monkey trembled for a while and staggered. Thereafter, it straightened its back and continued to dash on, pretending that nothing had happened. Suzumo looked down and saw that the spirit monkey's thigh had been pierced through by a flying sword. It was bleeding heavily nonstop. A striking and scarlet bloody trail was left on the snow behind it. Suzumo's heart ached. He could clearly sense that, earlier on, this sword was heading towards the middle of his back. However, at the 11th hour, the spirit monkey suddenly jumped. The spirit monkey noticed Suzumo's concern. It tilted its head and smiled. It looked a little silly, seemingly wanting to make Suzumo feel assured. Suzumo's sight gradually turned blurry. He was not sure if it was because the snowstorm was too strong or other reasons. The spirit monkey's speed had obviously slowed down. Its steps were also not as swift and agile as before. It was limping, looking a little unkempt and pitiful. Its thigh had been pierced through, and it must be dying of pain. How could it be all right? However, the spirit monkey still did not give up. Suddenly, the spirit monkey threw away the alloy steel rod in his hands, hurled Suzumo in front of his chest, and carried him. This was just a simple action, but Suzumo understood further. The spirit monkey was worried about the flying swords coming from behind. It was worried that the flying sword would hit Suzumo first. Hence, it carried Suzumo in front of its chest while bearing its own back to the flying swords. The joyful clan group was right on their heels and closing in. All of a sudden, the corner of Suzumo's eyes twitched vigorously. His scalp was blistering and he broke out in goosebumps. It was extremely dangerous. Without the cold moon saber by his side, Suzumo took out the sanguine crystal bow immediately. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a ring-shaped spirit weapon amongst the many flying swords behind the spirit monkey. Two dazzling and eye-catching spirit patterns were shining on it. The spirit monkey did not sense the threat of his ring-shaped spirit weapon. It could barely dodge the many flying swords. More wounds appeared on its body, and flesh and blood could be seen. It was a gruesome sight. This ring-shaped spirit weapon was charging towards the middle of the spirit monkey's back. They could not avoid it anymore. Suzumo bit the tip of his tongue. He exhausted all of the remaining strength in his body, raised the sanguine crystal bow, and smashed towards the ring-shaped spirit weapon. Clang! Suzumo's entire body was shaken. The sanguine crystal bow left his hands. A cloud of bloody mist erupted from Suzumo's entire right arm. His skin burst open and his large tendons broke. All the bones in his arms were fractured and hanging down. This was a middle-grade spirit weapon, and the mid-stage Foundation Establishment Cultivator launched the attack with all his might. Suzumo could not endure it at all. The ring-shaped spirit weapon paused momentarily upon the impact of the sanguine crystal bow, but it still smashed heavily on the spirit monkey's back eventually. Bang! The spirit monkey's back caved in deeply. Horrifying sounds of bones breaking could be heard. Its entire body was shaken. Carrying Suzumo, it was directly hurled into the air before falling onto the snowy ground nearby. Chapter 48. Sanguine Ape Transformation. Chapter 48. Sanguine Ape Transformation. A man and a monkey fell onto the cold and snowy ground. The spirit monkey vomited a huge mouthful of blood that coincidentally landed on Suzumo, splattering all over the latter's face. Suzumo's mouth was filled with the spirit monkey's warm blood. The spirit monkey turned to his side with his eyes drooping and pupils losing focus. He stared blankly at Suzumo, his eyes filled with some indignation, some nostalgia, some reluctance, and some regrets. Finally, it closed both its eyes. Monkey, Su Zimo called out, his heart trembling. The spirit monkey did not move the slightest bit. The vitality in its body was draining rapidly. The mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator had unsheathed the middle-grade spirit weapon and attacked with all his might. That had a devastating impact to the spirit monkey. If Su Zimo had not blocked the weapon with the Sanguine crystal bow and the weapon were to pierce through the spirit monkey's body, the monkey could have disintegrated. Su Zimo wriggled his body in the snow and crawled to the spirit monkey. He reached out his uninjured left palm and patted the spirit monkey's cheeks continuously, speaking in a trembling voice, "Monkey, wake up. Please don't die." The spirit monkey did not utter a sound. It looked like it had fallen asleep. Su Zimo bowed his head. His black hair scattered down and covered both his eyes, which were gradually reddening. It was not light or dark red. It was a bloody scarlet red. It was striking, eerie, and frightening. Su Zimo was already covered in wounds. After being splashed with and swallowing the spirit monkey's blood, a trace of the spirit monkey's blood had already been integrated into his blood and veins. This trace of blood from the spirit monkey was circulating rampantly in his body and resulted in many strange and chaotic changes. Su Zimo's veins and blood were boiling. Besides Su Zimo himself, the Joyful Clan people would not be able to sense such changes. The Joyful Clan people floated in midair, encircling a man and a monkey. They finally heaved a sigh of relief. Elder Chin looked as though he had a weight off his shoulders. He swallowed his saliva and smiled lightly. Although there were some hiccups, we still didn't let them escape. At the sound of these words, Elder Chin's face dimmed. Just as he wanted to ask Elder Chin to shut his jinxed mouth up, he heard a sound filled with cold and pervasive murderous intent. "All of you have to die today." Everyone glanced at the source of the sound, only to see Su Zimo, who was kneeling on the snow, suddenly standing up and gradually turning his head back. As the cold wind blew past him, a pair of bloody red eyes were revealed. Pissed. After being glanced at by this pair of bloody eyes, everyone suddenly felt chills down their spines and could not help gasping in cold. Sanguine, ape, transformation. Just as he finished his words, the energy in the blood and veins of Su Zimo's body surged rampantly. His large tendons pulsated, flesh and blood recharged, body expanded into a strong and huge figure that actually reached a height of 10 feet. 10 feet was already slightly more than 3 meters tall. He was 2 times taller than an ordinary man. Although the Joyful Clan people were flying in the air, they were at most at the height of about 10 feet. If they were too far away, their control of the spirit weapons would definitely weaken. However, Su Zimo's current height was already 10 feet. Both his eyes were at the same level as the Joyful Clan people. In comparison to Su Zimo, everyone suddenly looked relatively small and insignificant. What monster is this? Some of the Chi refinement warriors were so scared that they turned as white as a sheet. Their voices were trembling. Giant. Wrong. This appearance did not belong to the human clan. Sanguine Ape Transformation's transformation was not restricted to the body figure and height. Even Su Zimo's appearance had undergone a drastic change. He looked ferocious and frightening, and bore a resemblance to the spirit monkey who was lying on the ground. A giant ape? The muscles on Su Zimo's body were knotted together like metal casing. They were flickering with metallic shine and filled with an explosive strength. That pair of bloody eyes were exuding endless murderous intent. Wind and snow seemed to have solidified at every nook and crook swept across by that bloody glance. Kill! Su Zimo gave out a deep and furious roar. He strode forward, reached out his left arm, opened his hands and simply grabbed Gong Liangjing, who was in midair. Su Zimo hated these 3 Foundation establishment cultivators of Joyful Clan to the core. If not for them, the spirit monkey would not have been injured, and its life or death unknown. Gong Liangjing's reaction was a tad slower. He had just wanted to reverse his flying sword and dash higher into the sky. However, he had a surprise blackout as Su Zimo's palm had already enshrouded and clutched him. Su Zimo squeezed hard. Poof! A mist of blood filled the air. Gong Liangjing, who was at the early-stage Foundation establishment realm, was crushed by Su Zimo. At this moment, Elder Qian and Elder Chun had just flew to a height of 20 feet. When they looked back instinctively, their eyes met with this gruesome and bloody scene. They could not help shivering with shock and fear in their hearts. It is no wonder that this Su Zimo's body is so scary. It is because he is not human but demon. He is a spirit beast. Elder Qian said coldly. He could still feel the fear in his heart. Should we report this to the clan first and get more reinforcements to come here? Elder Chun was also feeling a little scared. Elder Qian waved his hands and said, "We don't need to worry. This Su Zimo must have used some demon techniques to stimulate the potential of his body. He can't hang on for too long." Just as he finished his words, Elder Qian saw something from the corner of his eye and was scared out of his wits. He did not even have the time to call out to Elder Qian as he started fleeing to one side. Bang! Both Su Zimo's feet stepped on the ground heavily. His legs bent slightly and then jumped into the air. Initially, there was nothing to be alarmed about a jump. However, Su Zimo's leap actually covered a height of 10 feet. How strong must the body be in order to erupt such frightening strength? Elder Chan heard a deafening sound. Slightly distracted, he felt his vision dimming, and he looked up instinctively. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already appeared at the top of his head. A humongous footprint landed and trampled with the power capable of destroying everything. Bang! The footprint landed on top of Elder Chin's head. The protection talisman was shining brightly and shaking vigorously. Lines of cracks appeared on its surface. This protection talisman had been released for a long time. Hence, there was very little spirit chi left on it. On the impact of Su Zimo's violent strength, it was instantly on the verge of collapse and could shatter to pieces at any point in time. Once the protection talisman lost its effect, Elder Chen would be no different from other chi refinement warriors in front of Su Zimo. Elder Chen turned pale with fright. Just as he wanted to flee from the spot with the flying sword, another soul immediately trampled. There was hardly any pause in between. This time, it was even more ferocious, strong, and powerful. Divine steed trampling. With every successive step, the strength would increase and become stronger. Snap! The protection talisman shattered. Another step came. Poof! Elder Chen was directly trampled till death by Su Zimo and ground into minced meat. In the blink of an eye, 2 out of the remaining 3 elders of Joyful Clan had died. Only the mid-stage Foundation establishment Elder Qian was left. Elder Qian knew that Su Zimo would definitely target him next. Swoosh! Elder Qian controlled the flying sword and rose continuously in the air, wanting to distance himself from Su Zimo as much as possible. No matter how strong Su Zimo was or how astonishing the powers he erupted, he could not fly, and that was his weakness. 30 feet, 40 feet. In the blink of an eye, Elder Qian had already risen to the height of 50 feet tall. It was only until now did Elder Qian's expression gradually ease. After calming down, he looked back. MMM? Elder Qian was stupefied. He exclaimed in puzzlement, "Where is he?" Su Zimo actually disappeared from the battlefield. How was that possible? He could not have escaped from the place in such a short time. At this moment, the few chi refinement warriors not far away pointed to the front of Elder Qian with shock and fear written on their faces. They seemed to have witnessed a terrifying sight. Chapter 49, Tomb. Chapter 49, Tomb. Swoosh! Sounds of snowflakes falling could be heard coming from behind Elder Qian. MMM? Elder Qian was stunned, and he looked back instinctively. Behind him was a tall and old tree. It was sturdy and straight, with a height of about 70 to 80 feet. Using both his hands and legs, Su Zimo was climbing up the tree like a giant ape with extreme ease. He had already reached the height of 50 feet. Elder Qian traveled by air, while Su Zimo relied on the old tree to climb up. Yet, there was not much difference in their speeds. Relying on the energy of the blood in veins, Sanguine ape transformation could not only improve Suzumo's body strength within a short time frame, but also cause major transformation to his body's agility, coordination, and flexibility. His speed had thus increased exponentially. The moment that Elder Qian looked back, Suzumo had bounced off the old tree. The bloody shine in his eyes intensified, and the murderous aura was towering. He reached out his gigantic palm, almost engulfing Elder Qian. Suzumo's palm looked soft and weak like a tongue. He gently wrapped it on Elder Qian's body, but erupted the strength of twisting and crushing someone. It was extremely cruel and savage. Pa! Elder Qian's body shook violently. The protection talisman shattered on the spot. Go! Elder Qian's expression changed greatly. Stepping on the flying sword, he tried his best to balance his body. In the panic and chaos, he quickly unsheathed the ring-shaped spirit weapon in his hands and smashed it towards Suzumo's chest. The two parties were very close to each other. Suzumo's body was in midair, and he had no place to lean on. Facing the oncoming ring-shaped spirit weapon, he had to fall on his back with his face facing the sky in order to dodge the attack. But if that were to happen, Suzumo would also drop from the sky. Suzumo's bloody eyes were filled with viciousness. Facing the ring-shaped spirit weapon, he neither retreated nor dodged. His palm transformed into a fist. Using the fist as a seal, his left arms drew a gigantic arc in the air. Boom! The gigantic seal landed. Following bovine-tongued Saber was Sanguine ape fist seal. Suzumo would rather take the hit by the middle-grade spirit weapon so that he could kill Elder Qian with his palm. Elder Qian was really panicking. He could clearly sense Suzumo's determination to perish together with him. Just as the ring-shaped weapon left his hands, Elder Qian did not think twice about patting the storage bag and took out another brand-new protection talisman. He immediately tore it with a pinch of his fingers. Elder Qian's face revealed a pained expression. To him, every talisman was very precious. This was reserved by Elder Qian to save his life. It could block a wave of attacks from Foundation Establishment Cultivator. But now, he actually had to consecutively waste 2 protection talismans when chasing a mortal. Bang! The ring-shaped spirit weapon crashed onto Suzumo's chest directly, as if it had hit something strong and hard. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Suzumo's chest caved in deeply. His blood and flesh were mangled. If Elder Qian had not been distracted by the tearing of the protection talisman and, as a result, caused insufficient energy to condense on the spirit weapon, Suzumo would have died instantly when he released Sanguine ape transformation. Simultaneously, Suzumo's fist transformed into a gigantic seal and smashed on the top of Elder Qian's head heavily. Bang! The gigantic fist collided with the glowing shield formed by the protection talisman and erupted a deafening sound. Waves of air gushed and turned the falling snowflakes in the surroundings to vapors instantly. I blocked it. Elder Qian did not care about rejoicing. He escaped from the place on his flying sword as soon as possible. On the other hand, Suzumo's figure dropped from the sky. Fresh blood was spilling from his mouth, but the murderous gleam in his eyes did not reduce. He was still glaring viciously at Elder Qian, who was fleeing towards a greater height. Bang! Suzumo landed on the snowy ground heavily. Soon after, he turned and got up, panting and gasping heavily. Each breath of his was accompanied by a strong stench of blood. This were signs of grave injury to his internal organs. The injury to tendons and bones could heal fully after resting for 100 days. However, it was extremely hard to cure injuries to the vital organs of the body. Furthermore, no one was clearer than Suzumo about the condition of his own body. The earlier hit by Elder Qian had already crushed his internal organs. He could not live for too long. Elder Qian hid and loitered in the air. He did not leave. In Songlang mountain range, none of the other old trees had that kind of height. Elder Qian would not give Suzumo any more chances to come close to him. Suzumo clenched his fists. Suddenly, with his back facing the spirit monkey whose life and death was still unknown, he rampantly charged towards a direction. Although the Sanguine ape transformation could increase Suzumo's strength exponentially within a short time, it could not nurse his injuries. This meant that the injuries on Suzimo were still present. After an intensive battle, the injuries in his body had worsened. The Sanguine ape transformation made Suzimo turn into berserker mode. His nerves were numb, and he thus could not feel any pain in the body at all. Although Suzimo was swift and succinct in his movement techniques, his body had already crumbled both inside and out. He was only relying on the strength of his blood and veins to hang on with one breath. When the time of the Sanguine ape transformation was up, Suzimo would revert back to his original state and become even weaker. At the sight of Suzimo escaping, Elder Qian chased him hurriedly on the flying sword. The joyful clan suffered heavy casualties this time. He was the only one left among the 5 elders. If he did not kill Suzimo here, how could he explain this to the clan when he returned? Since Elder Qian had decades of experience in the cultivation world, he could tell that Suzimo was now an arrow at the end of its flight and could not hang on for long. Although the remaining 5 Qi refinement warriors from Joyful Clan also rushed over, they dared not get too close and kept a huge distance from Suzimo. Suzimo's speed gradually decreased. His body also began to shrink as he slowly reverted to his original appearance. Waves of fatigue surged in his heart and mind. He began to feel the pain on his various body parts intensifying. Suzimo gritted his teeth and continued to dash ahead. Not far away at the front was a valley. The steep hilltops surrounding it were straight, tall, and had strong walls. They looked ordinary and were very quiet. Suzimo came to the center of the valley and revealed a trace of a smile. The time for Sanguine ape transformation was almost up. Suzimo arrived at the middle of the valley and paused his steps. With his back facing the spirit monkey, he began to climb up the stone walls. The surrounding stone walls at the valley had many cave entrances. It was pitch dark, and there was no light inside them. The Joyful Clan people looked at the Suzimo who was covered in wounds, but still dared not move forward casually. They watched on as Suzimo climbed into a cave without any further movement. Everyone finally could not endure any further. They flew on their flying swords and arrived at the top of the valley. At the sight of the cave, entrances of various sizes on the surrounding stone walls, Elder Qian frowned. Suddenly, a trace of uneasiness flashed across his heart. At that very moment, Suzimo suddenly appeared at the entrance of the cave, holding a purple gigantic bird in his hands. He looked at Elder Qian and started laughing. That laughter was a little eerie and horrifying. It made people's hearts shudder. Pierce. Suzimo tugged with his might and simply broke the neck of this purple gigantic bird. Fresh blood flowed, and a unique stench of blood filled the air in the snow and wind. Chirp, 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 chirp. Suddenly, waves of hurried chirps of birds resonated and echoed in the valley. The pitch was getting higher and the sound getting clearer. Commotion could be heard coming from inside the caves of various sizes. At this very moment, Suzimo's voice could be heard. It was calm and still but made everyone's heart instantly sink to the bottom. I have said, Songlang Mountain Range is your tomb. Just as he finished his words, Suzimo threw away the gigantic purple bird in his hands and wriggled into the cave. In the cave surrounded by valleys, beams of purple lights shone in the darkness. Their lively eyes actually emanated endless murderous intent. Chirp. Another shrieking chirp could be heard, penetrating gold and cracking stones. Initially, they were still far away. When the Joyful Clan people came to their senses, a huge shadow had already engulfed the top of their heads and shrouded the wind and snow. Chapter 50. She still came. Chapter 50. She still came. The Joyful Clan people looked up, only to see a gigantic eagle with a huge pair of purple wings circling the skies above the valley. Its gigantic wings were spreading and shrouding the sky and sun. The wings on the purple eagle were impregnable and had an illustrious, metallic shine. Its pair of claws was strong and powerful, seemingly able to crush the hilltop. This was obviously the leader of the purple wing eagles. Both its eyes exuded boundless fury and murderous intent. A spirit demon? Elder Qian's voice was trembling, and his face drained of colors. In the eyes of cultivators, spirit demons could be divided into two categories: Foundation Establishment Realm and Golden Core Realm. The purple-winged eagle in front of them should be at the Foundation Establishment Realm, but it was obviously much more powerful than Elder Qian. Most importantly, this spirit demon could fly. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Chirping sounds of furor could be heard coming from the caves surrounding the valley. Numerous purple-winged eagles flew out of the cave. At one glance, there were hundreds of them. Although these purple-winged eagles were spirit beasts, there were more than enough of them to tear the joyful clan people into pieces. There was really nowhere to turn to. They could not even escape. Su Zimo's earlier words resonated in everyone's mind. In that moment, everyone understood. Su Zimo came here because he wanted to borrow the powers of these purple-winged eagles in Songlang Mountain Range to wipe them out in one swoop. This place was their tomb. No, we didn't kill it. That purple eagle. No, it's that man in the cave. A Qi refinement warrior spoke incoherently. He was so frightened that his lungs and guts were splitting. It was just that this explanation sounded too feeble. The spirit demons had a strong sense of territory possession. Even spirit beasts and spirit demons who intruded their territory would be viciously attacked by the purple-winged eagles, let alone cultivators from the human clan. Although Su Zimo killed that purple eagle, in the eyes of the purple-winged eagles, they had long classified the joyful clan people in the same category as Su Zimo. The detestable human clan. Chirp. The purple-winged eagles circling in the high skies chirped. In the next moment, hundreds of purple-winged eagles pounced on the joyful clan people murderously. At the same time, the leader of the purple-winged eagles dived down, opened its sharp claws and dashed towards Elder Qian to grab the latter's head. Everyone from the joyful clan felt devastated. This was a doomed situation. The moment that they stepped into the valley, they could no longer get out of it. The winds outside the cave were cold and pervasive. Nevertheless, it was very warm inside the cave. Thick straw mats were placed on the cold ground. Lying on top of them, Su Zimo could hear the miserable cries coming from outside. The corners of his lips curled into a smile. "Monkey, did you hear that? This group of people who harmed you are all going to die," Su Zimo said softly. The spirit monkey was lying by Su Zimo's side. Its eyes were shut, and it did not respond. Having lived in Songlang Mountain Range for 6 months, Su Zimo knew this place like the back of his hand. Both he and the spirit monkey knew which areas were frequented by spirit demons and which areas posed extreme danger. Su Zimo had planned this well in advance. This was the key reason that he chose Songlang Mountain Range as his battlefield. On the warm straw mat were a few oval-shaped bird eggs with faint purplish lines on the eggshells. They looked very beautiful. Su Zimo casually took 2 of the eggs and knocked them against each other using the remaining bit of his strength. Crack, crack. Lines of cracks appeared on the eggs and purplish gold liquid flowed out of them, emitting a strong fragrance. Su Zimo placed one of the eggs by the spirit monkey's mouth and the other by his own mouth. He sucked the liquid bit by bit. He could not help smiling when he said, "Monkey, haven't you been longing for this egg? I have brought it here for you today." The spirit monkey often mentioned to Su Zimo that eggs of purple-winged eagles were extremely nutritious and tasty. However, there was a purple-winged eagle at the spirit demon level. On normal days, the 2 of them dared not even approach the eggs. The spirit monkey felt proudest about one thing in its life. He secretly ate an egg belonging to a purple-winged eagle and escaped safe and sound thereafter. The purple-winged eagles were one of the rare birds that would go through various stages of hibernation during winter. A man and a monkey already had plans to come here to steal the eggs once winter was approaching, and when the purple-winged eagles were hibernating. They would be less sensitive to the outside world at that time. Unfortunately, Su Zimo left at the beginning of winter. The spirit monkey's lips were tightly shut. The purplish gold liquid flowed down the corner of its mouth and dropped onto the straw mat. There was no response from it all this while. At the sight of this, Su Zimo's eyes dimmed. The fragrant liquid in his mouth suddenly turned tasteless. The miserable cries outside gradually faded. Elder Qian's hysterical shout could be heard. Su Zimo, you can't leave here even if I am dead. Do you think this group of beasts will let you off? Elder Qian cried in pain, and there was no more noise thereafter. Su Zimo smiled. Since he had arrived here, Su Zimo did not intend to leave this place alive. The objective of this plan was for everyone to perish together. It was just that Su Zimo did not expect to implicate the spirit monkey in the end. Su Zimo struggled to stand up and walk out of the cave. Looking at the over 50 corpses beyond recognition in the valley, devoured and torn to pieces by the purple-winged eagles, he shook his head. A flash of mockery streaked across his eyes. So what if they were Foundation establishment cultivators? So what if they were an immortal clan? Eventually, they still died in an obscure corner of this Songlang mountain range without anyone knowing. In actual fact, one would say that the death of the joyful clan people was due to Su Zimo's trap rather than being devoured by the purple-winged eagles. From the moment the joyful clan people stepped into Songlang mountain range, they had already fallen into an invisible net. Led around the nose by Su Zimo, they were heading to the abyss of death with every step that they took. In midair, the leader of the purple-winged eagles sensed something as it suddenly lifted its head and landed its icy cold gaze on Su Zimo. The murderous intent was akin to that of a saber. Su Zimo had seen it before on his first night in Songlang mountain range. The numerous purple-winged eagles gradually stopped devouring the corpses. Flapping their wings in the air, they fixed their gazes on Su Zimo, only waiting for the order from their leader before they charged forward to tear Su Zimo into pieces. Chirp! The spirit demon-level purple-winged eagle chirped loudly. Swoosh! Numerous purple-winged eagles swarmed over like a turbulent purple sea that would drown Su Zimo in the next moment. Facing the incoming death, Su Zimo was calm. He neither retreat nor panic. From the moment that he embarked on the path of cultivation, Daiyu had told him that he would face unimaginable dangers and could lose his life at any time. He should not expect her to save him. At that moment, Su Zimo replied that life and death were preordained. This moment had eventually arrived. It was just that Su Zimo did not expect it to come so soon. All of a sudden, in Su Zimo's line of sight, a flash of unrivaled, stunning scarlet color that seemingly wanted to dye the entire world red suddenly flashed across that purple sea. It was impossible to overlook it. The shadow of a figure appeared and blocked the front of Su Zimo. Su Zimo opened his mouth slightly. There was first shock in his eyes, followed by endless delight and happiness. The intruder was clad in a long, blood-colored robe. Back facing Su Zimo, she had a slim figure and her dark tresses were hanging loosely around her neck, blowing in the breeze. You dare touch my people, then you shall die. The calm tone, pleasant voice and lazy drawl. Yet, the dominance in it was suffocating. Su Zimo suddenly felt like crying. He had fantasized countless times about Daiyu appearing in the times of critical danger but had been repeatedly disappointed. She still came. Chapter 51. A Tiger's Prowess at Heart. Chapter 51. A Tiger's Prowess at Heart. Su Zimo opened his eyes wide to catch a clear glimpse of Daiyu's every move, but waves of fatigue hit him. No longer able to endure it, he collapsed. From the battle in the capital to the slaying of Luo Tianwu in Jianan City, the ambush in Songlang Mountain Range to the journey of running for his life, he had not slept or rested for more than 2 weeks. Having traveled day and night, Su Zimo had already exhausted the last bit of strength in his body. The moment that he shut his eyes, Su Zimo could only see Daiyu stretching out her fair palm and blocking that torrential purple sea with extreme ease. In the next moment, Daiyu clenched her fists. The purple sea exploded instantly, emanating a sorrowful yet breathtaking mist of blood. Su Zimo fainted. Not knowing how long had passed, Su Zimo gradually regained his consciousness. He could sense a familiar aura when he opened his eyes. This was the cultivation field. Su Zimo was soaked in the wooden barrel. He seemed to have returned to 1 year ago. Dayu sat on the green stone not far away with a cold and aloof expression. He did not know what she was thinking. Where is the monkey? How is he? The first thing that Suzimo did when he woke up was to check on the spirit monkey's condition. Dayu did not reply. Suzimo hurried to explain. There is a spirit monkey lying in that cave. He is my friend and suffered grave injuries in order to save me. Miss Dai, you must save it. Suzimo was anxious, but he could not continue further. Given Dayu's temperament, it was already surprising that she would appear to save him. Why would she care about the life of a spirit beast? After some time, Dayu said nonchalantly, you don't need to bother about it. Its physique is much stronger than you. Ah! Suzimo was momentarily stunned. Thereafter, he was overjoyed. He pursued, the monkey is still alive? Dayu was silent, seemingly like she could not be bothered to respond. Suzimo could not help smiling. He continuously nodded and muttered to himself, not bad, not bad. Since I managed to survive and that damn monkey's physique is stronger than mine, it must still be alive. After putting down his worries, a trace of doubt arose in Suzimo's heart again. He could not help but ask, Miss Dai, although I am not part of the demon clan, after cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, why is my physique still incomparable to that damn monkey? The corners of Dayu's mouth pursed slightly. You have only cultivated 3 sections, body tempering, tendons transformation, and bone strengthening, and only attained initial success for them. The most difficult part of this skill that will cause great changes to your body are all at the later sections. You're still far from it. Suzimo nodded. Looking at his body, he discovered that his right arm, which had almost become invalid, was completely fine now. There were no traces of injury on his body at all. How long have I been sleeping? Suzimo asked. 10 days. Suzimo was secretly shocked. He had suffered such grave injuries. Initially, he had felt very fortunate to have escaped death and thought that he would not recover completely. Unexpectedly, he was almost fully recovered in just 10 days after Dayu saved and brought him back. It was not just that. After this battle, Suzimo felt that his body had become significantly stronger and more powerful. His bones were tough and strong. He had attained initial success in the bone strengthening section. This could be called bringing the dying back to life with a miraculous cure. Was there anything else that Dayu could not do? Although Dayu had told Suzimo from the beginning that he was not allowed to inquire about her background and identity, Suzimo often pondered deeply about it in private. Who exactly was Dayu? At what cultivation realm was she at? Suddenly, Suzimo sensed something and looked over. On the green stone, Dayu was looking at Suzimo calmly. Both her eyes were as crystal clear as water. They were beautiful and glistening with traces of ripples. For some unknown reason, Suzimo suddenly felt a little nervous. Miss Dai, I have to go now. Suzimo's expression froze, and his mind went blank. You're not coming back? Yes. Suzimo was silent and in low spirits. In that instant, the joyful feelings of surviving a calamity vanished completely into the thin air. Dayu said, I can't teach you anymore. Hence, I have planted a spirit root in you. The quality won't be any lesser than the heaven spirit root. For your next steps, go look for an immortal cultivation clan to join. Can a spirit root be planted? Others cannot, but I can. Dayu seemed to have thought of something. She smiled faintly and said, after going into immortal cultivation, you can also execute sword kinesis flight. You won't be in such embarrassing situations again. Cultivators could execute sword kinesis flight and take down the enemy's head within 1,000 miles. It would be untrue if one were to say that he was not envious of this. If he had heard this news earlier, Suzimo would definitely feel thrilled and overjoyed. However, Suzimo really could not lift his spirits now. Why? After a long time of silence, Suzimo looked up and asked, Do you know why I led you onto the path of cultivation? Dayu questioned him instead. Suzimo shook his head. 1 year ago, when Suzimo was down and out and almost lost everything, Dayu appeared before him and asked, Do you wish to cultivate? That scene, those words. Su Zimo would never forget them for life. However, Su Zimo did not know why Daiyu had imparted him Demon Clan cultivation technique and taught him cultivation. There are two reasons. First, when we met 3 years ago, I was at my weakest state. It can be considered that you saved my life by bringing me here. Over the next 2 years, you prepared meals and sent them to my doorsteps every day, never stopping once. Although I ignored you, I remember all of it. At the mention of this, Daiyu's slender figure left the green stone. Her entire charisma transformed, exuding an air of arrogance overriding the heaven and earth and could not be overlooked. She raised her voice and said, I, Daiyu, had never pleaded with anyone or owed anyone anything, except for you. Imparting you cultivation techniques is considered the closing of this karma. Su Zimo was stunned. Who could be so certain of not pleading with anyone in their entire life? Even immortals could not help feeling fearful at times. To not plead with anyone for life and attain Daiyu's success, it was hard to imagine the adversities that one would need to experience. There is also another reason. I saw my old self in you. Daiyu looked at Su Zimo and said, your exterior appearance is frail and weak, but you have the prowess of a tiger at heart. It is just that this ferocious tiger has been in a deep slumber. 1 year ago, the departure of your childhood sweetheart and the bullying by perfected Song Lang had awakened this ferocious tiger in your heart. Do you still remember your reaction when that rogue came to murder you 1 year ago? Su Zimo pursed his lips gently and did not utter a word. You almost killed him. Daiyu continued. Who would imagine that a frail and weak-looking scholar would have such a calm look in his eyes when he felt murderous? Your wrists were so steady. At that moment, in my eyes, you were a jade that had not been carved and polished. You are born to venture into the cruel and bloody cultivation world. Su Zimo felt a little emotional. If Daiyu had not led him onto the path of cultivation back then, he would most likely have died of depression in the remaining years of his life, much less to mention the blood feud of the Su family. Even if he was a tiger at heart, he did not have a spirit root. Hence, he could only be an old tiger without any claws. Seemingly sensing Su Zimo's thoughts, Daiyu furrowed her brows gently and said in puzzlement, your endowment is 1 in a million, but you lacked a spirit root. Logically, everyone should be born with a spirit root. It is just that there is differentiation between the stronger and weaker spirit roots. However, in this part of the world, many people don't have a spirit root. This is very strange. After pausing for a while, Daiyu shook her head and said, forget it. There are hidden secrets in every part of the world. I don't have the time to probe either. I should be leaving. Having said that, Daiyu's figure moved and she headed outside. Su Zimo hurriedly jumped out from the wooden barrel, casually grabbed a piece of clothing to cover himself, and chased after her. Chapter 52. Transformed into butterflies and left. Chapter 52. Transformed into butterflies and left. Miss Dai, where are you going? Su Zimo chased all the way to the courtyard, feeling reluctant to part with her. He called out loud. Of course it's back to my world. Daiyu turned around and looked at Su Zimo with a smile on her face, as she said jokingly, you and I are from 2 different worlds. This was what Shenmengqi said to Su Zimo when she left him back then. Now that the same words were spoken by Daiyu, there was no contempt in it. Instead, it seemed as if they were very good long-time friends and were joking with each other. Of course, there was a hint of melancholy to it. Daiyu had never used this tone when she spoke to Su Zimo. She seldom smiled at him. It was not until now that Su Zimo realized that Daiyu was really leaving him. But, you haven't taught me the remaining cultivation techniques of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. How can you leave? Su Zimo racked his brains and finally came up with a reason. Daiyu shook her head. You already have the spirit root. You should join the immortal sect. Don't continue with your demon cultivation. Why? Su Zimo frowned, saying, I want to continue with demon cultivation and to learn immortal cultivation. Immortal and demon cultivation? Daiyu's beautiful eyebrows raised slightly. She could not help but smile. You are quite ambitious. Dayu paused briefly before she said, Spirit, she can nourish and temper the body. Although the body will not be as strong as the demon clan, it is still fairly strong. But do you know why most of the cultivators have a weak body? Why? There is a limit to one's energy. No matter whether it is a mortal cultivation or demon cultivation, one cannot live forever. One cannot escape from life and death. If one continues with immortal cultivation and demon cultivation, there is a high possibility that one cannot reach the end for either cultivation. Suzimo thought about it and said, I want to give it a try. Dayu continued, I won't stop you if you want to go ahead with immortal and Buddha cultivation. But immortals and demons belong to different worlds. Immortal is immortal, while demon is demon. If you insist on doing immortal and demon cultivation, both sides would not tolerate you. Now that you just started demon cultivation, you should give it up now. I don't want to give up. Suzimo insisted stubbornly. Even if the entire world would turn against you. So what if the entire world turns against me? To Suzimo, this cultivation technique was imparted to him by Dayu. It had an important significance. Even if the whole world stopped him from cultivating, he would continue with it. After a brief silence, Dayu said, The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness will get more and more difficult. You won't be able to succeed without me by your side. Dayu sighed at the obstinate look in Suzimo's eyes, finally giving in. There was a demonic glitter in Dayu's eyes. Thereafter, there were several more sutras in Suzimo's mind. Dayu looked at Suzimo, saying softly, These are the remaining sutras. Remember, if it is too difficult to cultivate, don't waste your effort on them. Also, if the monkey at Songlang Mountain Range runs into trouble in the future, do give it a helping hand. Suzimo had a moment of realization upon hearing her words. Dayu had other intentions when she arranged for him to go through training at Songlang Mountain Range. Without the spirit monkey, Suzimo would not be able to master Sanguine Ape Tri-Style within a year. Without the spirit monkey, Suzimo would not be able to activate the Sanguine Ape transformation. Although Dayu never showed up during his 1 year of training at Songlang Mountain Range, she had been keeping a silent watch over him. Otherwise, she would not appear at the final crucial moment. After all, Dayu cared a lot for him. Suzimo gazed at Dayu quietly. His gaze was intense and somewhat irrational. It was as if he wanted to remember Dayu's facial features and imprint it deeply in his memory. If you want to continue with immortal and demon cultivation, you will experience a lot of unimaginable sufferings. But you must bear in mind that these sufferings will only make you stronger. There is a saying in the Avatamsaka Sutra of the Huayan school that I would like to give you as parting words. To become one of the greatest, you have to work on the foundation and be willing to take hardship and serve others. With that, Dayu turned around, waving to Suzimo. Dayu took a small step, and she was in midair. Under Suzimo's unwavering gaze, her graceful figure gradually disappeared into the air, transforming into a sanguine butterfly, with 2 bright crescent moons imprinted on the pair of wings. I left behind 3 gifts for you. The first gift is the spirit root in your body. As for the remaining 2 gifts, they may be of use to you in the future. Dayu flapped her wings, and the surrounding space collapsed and turned into fragments. Cracks formed as a dark void could be vaguely seen in the distance, stirring up chilly wind. It was unnerving. The butterfly flew into the darkness and gradually disappeared. Dayu. Suzimo ran a few steps and shouted toward the direction that Dayu flew to. I will go to look for you. The surrounding space gradually returned to normal, and the cracks fused together. Right then, a sound was heard coming from the void's abyss. Sure, I'll wait for you. Dayu had transformed into a butterfly and left. It was only when Dayu left did Suzimo realize that he had developed a strong attachment and dependence on Dayu. Suzimo stood rooted on the ground, constantly thinking about what happened here over the past 1 year. He was lost in his thoughts. The sun rose, breaking through the dark clouds. Unknowingly, Suzimo had stood under the peach blossom tree for an entire night, not moving at all. Finally, Suzimo raised his head. Looking into the distance, his eyes finally regained focus. He concealed the pain of separation and reluctance to part with Dayu deep in his heart. He took a deep breath before he turned to leave. Su Zimo passed by the Su family's residence and halted in his tracks. Supposedly, everyone in the Su family should be hiding at Sky Treasure Pavilion at Songlang City. But right now, the door to the mansion was opened, and he could vaguely hear sounds coming from within. Su Zimo felt perplexed and went in to check. Second young master? Second young master is back. Everyone in the Su family's residence was elated to see Su Zimo. Su Hong came out with the rest to welcome Su Zimo. Zimo, are you all right? Su Hong came forward, grabbing hold of Su Zimo's shoulder and sized him up. I am all right. Su Zimo shook his head, asking, why aren't all of you at Sky Treasure Pavilion? Song Chi said, we were going to leave Pingyang Town when a red-robed lady turned up all of a sudden to stop us. As Song Chi was recollecting what happened, he still could not hide the shock that he felt back then. The lady was very powerful. She did not need to leverage any external objects, and she could fly into the air. She must at least be a golden core cultivator. She told all of us to wait for her, saying that she would bring you back. And she disappeared right in front of us. At the mention of the lady, everyone in the Su family could not hide their appalled and shocked expression. Su Zimo hung his head. No one noticed the loneliness and sadness in his eyes. Zimo, is that lady your master? Everyone in the Su family could tell that Su Zimo had undergone a total transformation. He had changed from a frail scholar to a warrior who could slay Chi refinement warriors. It must be due to the mysterious lady. She is not my master. Su Zimo shook his head. Although Dayu taught him demon cultivation, Su Zimo had never treated Dayu as his master. Where is the lady? We have to express our gratitude to her. We must not neglect her, Su Hong continued to say. She's gone, Su Zimo said softly. Everyone was silent. Su Zimo recovered himself and smiled. Brother, what plans do you have next? The Su family's situation was tricky. They could not go to the country of Yin, and they could not stay in the country of Qi. They could only leave their homeland to stay in other states. I have no idea as well. Su Hong sighed softly, looking toward the country of Yin that was far in the distance as he said in a low voice, I still can't bear to leave. Right then, a black armored cavalry galloped from afar and shouted loudly even before he reached. Report, young master, the country of Yan's army are closing in. There are at least hundreds of thousands of them. Among them were cultivators as well. Chapter 53, Su Hong was crowned king. Chapter 53, Su Hong was crowned king. The army of the country of Yin? Su Hong frowned, feeling perplexed. The country of Yin is without a leader. The first thing right now should be to elect a new king, and to keep the army and the officials' morale high. Why would they lead an army to deal with us? It doesn't make sense. Uncle Zhang shook his head as well. There are hundreds of thousands of soldiers. That is the entire army of the country of Yin. Will they go to this extent just to deal with the Su family? I don't think so. Cultivators? There was a coldness in Su Zimo's eyes, and he thought to himself, it must be the Joyful Clan. 10 days ago, the Joyful Clan sent hundreds of cultivators to hunt down Su Zimo. In the end, all of them were slain in Songlang mountain range. The Joyful Clan could not possibly take this lying down. Furthermore, the Su family and Su Zimo had no interaction with the cultivation world. Their only enemy was the Joyful Clan. Brother, bring the Su family to retreat to Songlang City first. I will follow thereafter, Su Zimo said in a deep voice. Su Zimo had just finished his sentence, and he seemed to sense something, looking into the far distance. At the far end of the sky, there was a group of more than 1,000 people rushing over in alarming speed. All of them were cultivators, and they were executing the sword kinesis flight in mid-air. Su Zimo squinted his eyes. He could see them very clearly. The cultivators were moving at a fast speed. They were already at the Foundation Establishment realm. This was a group that was made up entirely of Foundation Establishment cultivators. Could the Joyful Clan be so powerful? It's too late. Song Qi looked grim as he shook his head. Su Hong clenched his fists, saying in a cold voice, "I will gather the black armored cavalry. We can't possibly sit here waiting for our deaths." "Wait a minute." Su Zimo stopped Su Hong, shaking his head. "Don't act rashly. We will act according to the circumstances." Regardless of whether it was Su Hong or Song Qi, they had not sparred with Foundation Establishment cultivators before. But Su Zimo knew the abilities of the Foundation Establishment cultivators very well. If the group of more than 1,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators attacked them, a 50,000-strong black armored cavalry would be wiped out, notwithstanding a 5,000-strong black armored cavalry. They were not at Songlang mountain range. Su Zimo was not the opponent of one Foundation Establishment cultivator, let alone 1,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators. They could do nothing but wait. The 1,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators reached the sky of Pingyang Town in no time. They were dressed uniformly, and they exuded the harsh and murderous aura. They did not look like cultivators. Instead, they seemed more like the National Army. At the furthest front of the 1,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators was a graceful and magnificent carriage that floated in the air. It was adorned with brilliant jewels and pearls, dazzling and sparkling in midair. Although no one carried the carriage, it floated steadily in midair. There was sparkling bead curtain at the front of the carriage. There seemed to be someone seated in the carriage. One could not tell the person's facial features due to the bead curtain. Everyone in the Su family was shocked. Song Qi, who was a Qi refinement warrior, had never seen such a large army either. He was dumbstruck. "Something is wrong," Uncle Zhang said softly. The markings on the cultivators' costumes seemed to be that of the Great Zhou dynasty. Every Foundation Establishment cultivator who was in midair had an exquisite 5-clawed golden dragon imprinted on the sleeves. It was very realistic and majestic. Right then, the leader of the Foundation Establishment cultivators came out from the crowd. He wore a golden Taoist robe and stood floating in the air. He swept his sharp gaze over everyone in the Su family, pausing slightly when he saw Su Zimo. He then took out a golden silk from his storage bag and spread it out. Su Hong and Uncle Zhang had a big shock at the sight of the golden silk, exclaiming in surprise, "The Emperor's Imperial Edict." The Great Zhou dynasty was the only one who had the right to issue the golden silk, and it was from the Emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty. Who was the Emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty? He was the supreme leader of the Great Zhou dynasty. He had achieved a lot of meritorious deeds, surpassing the ancients and dazzling contemporaries, holding absolute power in his hands. If the emperor was angered, millions of people had to die. Since the imperial edict was issued, every state in the Great Zhou dynasty had to submit unconditionally. Otherwise, it would be seen as an act of defiance, and they would be punished by the Great Zhou dynasty. King Qian of Yin was unscrupulous and framed loyal subjects, causing chaos to his country and governance. It is right that he be removed. It was said that Su Hong is the son of Su Mu, and he is well loved by the people and has courage and wits, loving the people like his own. He is qualified to be the next king. I hereby issue this imperial edict crowning him as king. Everyone is to spread the news and not to hinder the spreading of this edict. The golden armored leader who was in midair rolled the imperial edict. He stared at Su Hong and said in a deep voice, "Su Hong, accept the imperial edict." Su Hong froze in place, looking shocked. There was disbelief in his eyes. The Great Zhou dynasty hardly intervened in the affairs of the various states. It was rare that it would issue imperial edicts, let alone crown someone as the king of a vassal state. It was not that Su Hong did not want to be the king. The reason why he rejected Wei Mingqing's proposal was that he was worried that if he was crowned king, war would definitely break out and it would implicate the innocent people of the country of Yin. But right now, with the imperial edict, Su Hong could be crowned the king, and yet there would be no wars in the country of Yin. If anyone had objections and launched a war, he would not be going against Su Hong, but the imperial edict. No one would be so foolish to do such things. It was akin to courting death. More importantly, everyone in the Su family would no longer need to leave their homeland to go to other states. and the black armored cavalry would finally have a place to stay for good. "Young master, hurry, accept the edict." Uncle Zhang was excited. He could not hide his happiness, and he urged him softly. But Su Hong was in a difficult position. He had never seen the emperor of the great Zhou dynasty before, and the imperial edict came all of a sudden. He could not help but feel worried and perturbed. Su Hong looked towards Su Zimo automatically. Su Zimo frowned, shaking his head. He had never seen anyone from the great Zhou dynasty as well. The only possibility was that it was Dai Yu's doing. Before Dai Yu left, she told Su Zimo that she had left 3 gifts for him. One of them was the spirit root, but she did not tell him the remaining 2 gifts. Could it be that one of the gifts was the crowning of his older brother? But that did not make any sense. Su Zimo felt baffled. He whispered to his older brother, "Brother, you should accept the edict first." Su Hong nodded and took a deep breath, making a bow, before he knelt down on one knee, saying in a low voice, "Su Hong accepts the imperial edict." The golden armored leader waved his hands, and the imperial edict landed softly on Su Hong's hands. It sparkled with gold radiance, exuding a majestic aura, as if the emperor was here. Right then, fumes and dust billowed in the wind from not too far away. There was a thunderous sound of hooves. The country of Yan's army had just arrived. They were led by famed generals of the country of Yan. Among them was Wei Mingxing, the general of Jinan City. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers came galloping over. There were so many of them, one could not see the end of the line. The generals at the front line dismounted and knelt down on one knee at sight of Su Hong, shouting loudly, "We pay respects to the king! We pay respects to the king!" Hundreds of thousands of soldiers yelled and the loud voices resonated. The Su family finally realized that the hundreds of thousands of soldiers were not here to seek revenge. Instead, they were here to pay respects to the new king of the country of Yan, and to welcome him back to stand guard at the capital. Although this was a good piece of news, the Su family seemed to be at a loss. They felt that everything was surreal, and they seemed to be dreaming. Su Zimo raised his head, looking toward the carriage that was floating in midair. He fixed his gaze on it as if trying to see through it. Swoosh! A porcelain white fair arm reached out from the carriage to lift the bead curtain. A beauty came walking out from the carriage. She was dressed in a yellow long dress, with a ribbon tied at her waist, fully accentuating her exquisite figure. The lady had complexion that was fair as snow. She looked refreshing and mesmerizing. The moment she exited the carriage, the graceful and magnificent carriage seemed to pale in comparison to her. "Zimo, didn't I say that we will definitely meet again?" The lady waved her hands at Su Zimo, smiling. Chapter 54, Annihilation. Chapter 54, Annihilation. Upon hearing what the lady said, everyone present could not help but brim with curiosity. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone fixed their gaze on Su Zimo. The Su family gaped in shock. Everyone could tell that the lady in front was from a noble family and had a powerful background. She could likely be from the great Zhou dynasty's royal family. From the tone of the lady, the Su family were further surprised that the lady seemed to be on close terms with second young master Su. The foundation establishment cultivators behind the lady stared at Su Zimo, envy and jealousy evident in their eyes. There was a hint of provocation in the eyes of the golden armored leader. Yao Shui controlled a flying sword and landed on the ground, gazing at Su Zimo, who looked astonished. She pursed her lips as she smiled. "Don't you recognize me? You?" Su Zimo finally recovered himself, smiling. "Are you the disciple from Azure Frost sect?" "Yes." Yao Shui nodded, pausing before she continued. "However, I am a princess of the great Zhou dynasty as well. My surname is Ji. Back then we came together by chance and I hid the fact from you. Will you blame me for that?" Su Zimo smiled, shaking his head. Ji was not a common surname. If Yao Shui revealed her surname back then, he would most likely have guessed her background from her surname. But now that he thought about it, there were some clues that pointed to her identity. Ji Yaoshui knew everything about Sky Treasure Pavilion and could gift Su Zimo with a Sky Treasure Gold badge casually. Ordinary Foundation establishment cultivator would not be able to do that. We are old acquaintances. Aren't you going to invite me for tea? Ji Yaoshue bent her head to the side, blinking at him. Sure, come over to my place. Su Zimo nodded to Su Hong, telling him to rest assured before he brought Ji Yaoshue to his mansion. The golden armored leader brought several Foundation establishment cultivators with him and followed them to the mansion. He seemed to be worried that they would be spending time alone. Su Zimo and Yao Shui sat at a round table at the courtyard. There were 2 cups of fragrant tea that were piping hot. The golden armored leader and the rest stood behind Yao Shui. The golden armored leader stared at Su Zimo. There was hostility in his eyes. Su Zimo had already noticed it, but he did not let it bother him. Yao Shui, why? Audacious. Su Zimo had a lot of doubts and was just about to ask Yao Shui some questions when he was yelled at by the golden armored leader. It is a taboo for a mere mortal to call the princess by her name. The golden armored leader sneered. There was contempt in his eyes as he stared at Su Zimo. Dai Su. Without waiting for Su Zimo to speak, Ji Yaoshue arched her eyebrows, speaking in a low voice. It is none of your business how Zimo addresses me. Wait by the side. Third princess, the emperor ordered me to ensure your safety and not to leave your side. Dai Su bowed slightly, cupping his fists. Then keep your mouth shut. Ji Yaoshue gave a sideways glance to Dai Su, sending him a look of warning. Yes, princess. Dai Su looked upset. He glared at Su Zimo before he answered. Su Zimo remained composed. He ignored Dai Su's provocation and did not look in his direction. Ji Yaoshue smiled apologetically at Su Zimo and said, a few days ago, there was a secret report from Sky Treasure Pavilion and I happened to chance upon it. From the description, I guess that you were the one who killed the king of Yin. Therefore, I begged my father to issue an imperial edict and came with all of them. Ji Yaoshue did not tell him everything, but Su Zimo could roughly guess what was going on. Before that, the emperor must have sent people to conduct a detailed check on the Su family. Are you pleased with this arrangement? Ji Yaoshue smiled as she asked. It's pretty good. Su Zimo nodded. With this imperial edict, Su Hong could be crowned the king without engaging in any fights, and the surrounding states would not dare to intrude on the country of Yan's territory. To him, this was a big favor. But Su Zimo was not someone to flatter people. Instead, he would remember their kindness deep down inside his heart. Why do you bring so many Foundation establishment cultivators with you? Su Zimo continued to ask. Ji Yaoshue frowned slightly, saying, after returning to the clan, I conducted some investigations on Joyful Clan and discovered that the cultivators are involved in evil deeds. They always abducted women and made use of their yin energy to supplement their own yang energy to aid their cultivation. I intend to eliminate this clan, but... Ji Yaoshue paused slightly. There was a flash of doubt in her eyes. But what? Su Zimo could roughly guess the reason, but he did not reveal anything. Ji Yaoshue continued. But I found out that more than 100 Joyful Clan cultivators had died at Songlang Mountain Range, and they had been through a very vicious fight. It felt as if they were hunting down one man, but was instead killed. At the mention of this, Ji Yaoshue raised her head to look at Su Zimo. Back then, the Joyful Clan had caused quite a commotion when they hunted down Su Zimo. The entire capital of the country of Yin had witnessed it. Oh! Su Zimo expressed his shock at hearing the news. His reaction was appropriate and suitable. Ji Yaoshue thought to herself, although Zimo is very capable, and he is very powerful in close combat, he would not have the capabilities to slay Foundation establishment cultivators. It should not be him. Instead, it must be someone else. After a brief silence, there was a flash of surprise in Ji Yaoshue's eyes. This is not the worst part. When we reached the place where the Joyful Clan inhabited, we realized that the entire clan was reduced to rubble, bones and corpses were strewn everywhere. No one was alive. Ah! This time, Su Zimo really had a shock. Although Su Zimo killed hundreds of cultivators from the Joyful Clan, the clan was still around. If there was a chance, the Joyful Clan would definitely seek revenge. 10 days had passed, but there were no news from the joyful clan. Suzimo could not help but be on tenterhooks. He did not expect that the entire clan was wiped out. The person who did it was way more powerful than the cultivators of the joyful clan. It seemed as if every cultivator of the joyful clan died instantaneously. It was definitely a different person from the person on Songlang Mountain Range, Ji Yaoshue said. Suzimo was reminded of a red-robed figure and a cold and stunning face. According to what Ji Yaoshue had said, Suzimo could not think of a second person who had the ability and would do such a thing. Before Dayu left, she must have been worried that the joyful clan would seek revenge on him. Therefore, she decided to take drastic measures by annihilating the entire clan, so that he would be free of troubles. However, Suzimo would never tell anyone about this. Ji Yaoshue let out a long breath before she smiled and said, "Let's not talk about this. Other than to crown a new king, there is another reason why I made this trip, and it is because of you." "What is it?" Suzimo asked. Ji Yaoshue took a stone that was the size of a fist out from her storage bag, placing it on the round table. She smiled as she asked, "Zimo, do you know what this is? Spirit stone? Unlikely." Suzimo shook his head. "This is a testing spirit stone. It can tell whether someone has a spirit root and as well as the grade of the spirit root." Ji Yaoshue went on to explain. "Zimo, given your capabilities, if you have a spirit root, even if it is the most ordinary spirit root, you will have huge achievements in the future. The clan has promised that I can bring someone with spirit root to join the clan. It doesn't matter even if it is the most ordinary spirit root. Zimo, you should give it a try." Chapter 55. The Five Main Clans. Chapter 55. The Five Main Clans. Suzimo looked at the testing spirit stone. He did not stretch out his hands. Instead, he seemed to be pondering. Before Dayu left, she had planted the spirit root for him. He knew that it might be as good as the heaven spirit root. Suzimo had no doubts about that. Suzimo had another thought after listening to what Ji Yaoshue had just said. Ji Yaoshue thought that Suzimo did not really know much about her clan. That was why he was reluctant to stretch out his hands. She began to explain. In the Great Zhou Dynasty's territory, there are 5 strongest clans. Zimo, you can be assured that the clan, Azure Frost sect that I am in, is among the 5 strongest clans. Suzimo was interested, and he asked all of a sudden, "What are the 4 other clans?" The 5 main clans are Iridescent Clouds Palace, Southern Mountains Clan, True Fire Sect, Azure Frost Sect, and Ethereal Peak. Suzimo lowered his head, blowing lightly at the tea leaves floating on the tea. There was a fleeting coldness in his eyes at the mention of Iridescent Clouds Palace. Suzimo looked up, his expression normal as he asked, "I suppose for those who join the 5 main clans, they have a high requirement for the spirit root. Is that so?" Ji Yaoshue nodded and said, "If you want to join the 5 main clans, one needs to have at least a superior class spirit root. Having a pseudo-spirit root and ordinary spirit root will not meet the mark. However, Zimo, you can rest assured that even if yours is a pseudo-spirit root, I can bring you to join the clan as well." The spirit root could be categorized into 5 grades: pseudo-spirit root, ordinary spirit root, superior class spirit root, earth spirit root, and the most rare heaven spirit root. That was to say, since Zhou Dingyun and Shen Mingqi were chosen by perfected Songlang from Iridescent Clouds Palace, they must at least have the superior class or higher grade spirit root. Suzimo smiled and took a sip of tea, asking casually, "Is there any feud between the 5 main clans? Or rather, which among the 5 clans is stronger?" "Feud?" Ji Yaoshue shook her head. "This I do not know, but Iridescent Clouds Palace and True Fire Sect are situated quite close to each other and have been getting along well. The 5 main clans are similar to each other in terms of capabilities, and each has their own strengths, of which Ethereal Peak is the most mysterious. In the Great Zhou Dynasty, we will hold a grand match between clans every 10 years. Every clan within the territory of the Great Zhou Dynasty can take part in it, regardless of its size. The 5 main clans have ranked the top 10 in terms of movement techniques, elixir refinement, weapon refinement, and creating talismans. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes, seemingly pondering about something. Since True Fire Sect and Iridescent Cloud's Palace were on close terms, Su Zimo would never join them. As for joining Azure Frost Sect, Su Zimo wanted to give this opportunity to Su Hong and Su Xiaoning. As to who would join the sect, it was entirely up to their destiny. That left Su Zimo with only Southern Mountains Clan and Ethereal Peak. Su Zimo asked again, among the 5 main clans, which is closest to the country of Yin? Ji Yaoshue took out a map made from animal skin out of her storage bag. She took a closer look before saying, the closest is Ethereal Peak. Su Zimo nodded, not saying any more. Zimo, why do you ask all these? Hurry, you should check your spirit root. Ji Yaoshue urged him once again. Su Zimo smiled lightly. Some cultivator had checked for me and said that I don't have a spirit root, so I won't do the testing. Ah. Ji Yaoshue could not hide her disappointment, but she wanted to give it another try, and so she tried persuading him again. Perhaps the person had seen it wrongly. You should check it again. Su Zimo said in a low voice, Yaoshue, this is a good chance. I have 2 closest kins, and I would like for them to give it a try, to see whether they have a chance to join Azure Frost Sect. This is good as well. Ji Yaoshue hesitated slightly before she agreed. Su Zimo stood up to thank her, and he came out with Su Hong and Su Xiaoning, explaining to them briefly how the testing spirit stone worked and telling them to give it a try. Su Hong waved his hands, shaking his head. I don't need to try. Even if I have spirit root, I won't take the cultivation path. Among the 3 of us, one has to inherit our father's legacy and continue with his work. Xiaoning, you can go ahead to test it. Su Xiaoning was hesitant. She seemed afraid, looking towards Su Zimo for help. Su Zimo smiled, holding his sister's little hand to the round table, as he spoke in a tender tone, Don't be afraid. All you have to do is to hold on to this stone. Su Xiaoning nodded, still feeling worried, but she seemed to have made up her mind. She went forward to grab hold of the testing spirit stone. At the moment when Su Xiaoning held the testing spirit stone, 5 rays of light in different colors shot out from the testing spirit stone. This was the first time that Su Xiaoning saw something like this. She had a shock, and she threw the stone away automatically. The 5 different rays of light represented the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. It was the pseudo-spirit root, the worst spirit root among all. Su Zimo rejoiced greatly in his heart. In any case, this meant that Su Xiaoning had a spirit root, and she could join one of the 5 main clans, Azure Frost Sect. In fact, even without his relationship with Ji Yaoshue, Su Zimo was able to join Azure Frost Sect with the spirit root that Daiyu planted for him. However, Su Zimo could vaguely sense something amiss and wanted to try to keep a distance between he and Ji Yaoshue. What was Ji Yaoshue's identity? She was the 3rd princess of the Great Zhou dynasty. She was of noble birth. Su Zimo was aware that their encounter this time had riled the guard behind Ji Yaoshue, and he was hostile toward him. If he continued to be on close terms with Ji Yaoshue, he might invite trouble for himself. He was not being afraid of them. It was just that he was still not as powerful, and he could not protect himself. But Su Xiaoning was different. She was after all a female, and she would not invite the hostility of others. Indeed, after witnessing the scene, there was a flash of delight in Dai Su, the golden armored leader's eyes. He let out a sigh of relief, and he seemingly relaxed his guard. Su Zimo looked at Ji Yaoshue, his expression solemn as he spoke in a deep voice. Since that is the case, please bring Xiaoning with you. She is timid, and she has not been to faraway places. Do take extra care of her during cultivation in Azure Frost Sect. You can rest assured that I will definitely take good care of her, Ji Yaoshue said. Brother, I don't wish to part with you, or to leave Su family. Su Xiaoning curled her lips, tears welling in her eyes. She was on the brink of crying. Su Hong laughed and said, It's good to cultivate. It is a golden opportunity. You must not miss the chance. Besides, when you are stronger, I will be asking you for help in the future. Su Xiaoning turned tears into smiles upon hearing Su Hong's teasing words. She nodded seriously. I will work hard to cultivate and come back to help brother in the future. Go along to pack your things and say goodbye to Uncle Zheng and the rest. Su Hong left with Su Xiaoning to pack her things. There was a smile in Su Zimo's eyes as he watched them left. Zimo, you, Ji Yaoshue wanted to say something but held back her tongue. Su Zimo smiled, standing up to bow to her as he said, I have to thank you for rendering help this time. It is because of you that the Su family have a place to stay and Xiaoning has a chance to join Azure Frost sect. If you have anything to ask of me in the future, I will definitely agree to it. Humph, Dai Su smirked. A hint of sarcasm flashed across his face. He curled his lips. How dare you boast without shame? She is the third princess of the great Zhou dynasty. How will she ever need your help? Su Zimo smiled lightly, not rebutting his words. Nobody would have imagined that the promise that Su Zimo gave right now would carry a lot of weight in the future. Chapter 56. Waiting for Someone. Chapter 56. Waiting for Someone. Next day morning. The Su family and many Foundation establishment cultivators stood on the long street of Pingyang Town, bidding their farewell. In the middle of the long street, one man and one lady stood facing each other. The man was dressed in a green robe, clean and plain, with a handsome appearance, while the lady wore a long pale yellow dress that reached the ground. Her black hair cascaded down her back. Her complexion was flawless. There was a touch of melancholy in her sparkling eyes. Zimo, are you really not leaving with me? Even if you can't join Azure Frost sect, given your capabilities, you will have great achievements at Great Zhou, Ji Yaoshue said softly. No. Su Zimo smiled. I am used to leading an unbridled life. I am unaccustomed to the rules and regulations of the palace. Zimo, are you interested in joining the Ethereal Peak? Ji Yaoshue was smart. She could vaguely sense that Su Zimo was deliberately keeping a distance from her. MMM? There was surprise in Su Zimo's eyes, but he did not respond. Ji Yaoshue continued. It is more difficult to join Ethereal Peak than other clans. There are many tests to pass. The testing of the Spirit Root is only one of them. I heard that many high-level Chi refinement warriors could not join the Ethereal Peak. You. Su Zimo sighed in his heart at the look of concern in Ji Yaoshue's eyes. He knew that Ji Yaoshue was being genuinely good to him. Perhaps it was to return his kindness or for some other reason. But no matter what, he could not leave with Ji Yaoshue. Although Dai Su had concealed his intentions well, he could not hide from Su Zimo's spirit perception. The man had murderous intent toward him. It was all right if it was Dai Su who wanted to kill him, however. If it was the Emperor of Great Zhou who wanted him dead, this was bad news to Su Zimo as well as the Su family. The Imperial Edict might seem like a reward, however, the Emperor was giving them a warning as well. Since the Emperor of Great Zhou could crown Su Hong as king, he could easily annihilate the Su family as well. The Emperor's power was vast and mighty, and one could not predict his next movement or intention. Dai Yu might have been ruthless when she sent Su Zimo to the Zhonglang mountain range, but she was teaching him at the same time that regardless of whether it was the mortal world or the cultivation world, it was no different from the Zhonglang mountain range, where the strong ruled over the weak, and that was the only way to survive. One had to be able to survive Zhonglang mountain range in order to be able to venture into the cultivation world. If one was not powerful enough, one could only be passive and be powerless when others preyed on them. Zimo, what plans do you have? Ji Yaoshue continued to ask. Su Zimo replied, to travel 1,000 miles beats reading 1,000 books. I might embark upon an adventure. Su Zimo paused briefly before he bowed to Ji Yaoshue, cupping his fists. Miss Ji, let's bid farewell today. Please take care. Ji Yaoshue looked dismayed upon hearing that Su Zimo addressed her as Miss Ji. After a brief silence, she nodded. Young Master Su, take care as well. Ji Yaoshue boarded the carriage, and the bead curtain dropped to cover her from view. The two of them seemed to be thrown into two different worlds, and they might not be able to see each other again. Su Xiaoning sat on the carriage and looked outside, tears falling down her cheeks. Ji Yaoshue sighed softly as she took Su Xiaoning into her embrace, saying softly, let's go. The carriage flew up into the air, and more than 1,000 Foundation establishment cultivators maneuvered their swords and followed behind, surrounding the carriage to protect the princess. They disappeared from the sky of Pingyang Town in no time. At the end of the procession, one of the Foundation establishment cultivators came up to Dai Su and asked softly, "Leader Dai, do we still need to kill Su Zimo?" "No need. At least he is tactful. He did not reach out for a yard after taking an inch." Dai Su sneered. "He is just a mere mortal. He is but a frog in a well. Just let nature run its own course." In the carriage, Su Xiaoning seemed to be overly upset. She collapsed in Ji Yaoshua's embrace and fell into a deep sleep. The tears at the corner of her eyes were still evident. Ji Yaoshua gazed at the bead curtain, looking forlorn. She frowned slightly, sorrow etched in her features, looking pitiful. "Princess, don't be sad over that man. It's not worth it," Dai Su said softly outside the carriage. Ji Yaoshua did not seem to have heard him. Dai Su continued, "Princess, you are of noble birth, and you are from the royal family. He is just a nobody. He is not worthy of you." Ji Yaoshua frowned. She checked on Su Xiaoning, who was deep asleep in her embrace, before she turned her head and said softly, "If he is a nobody, then what about you? You don't have to care about my business. You are not qualified." Ji Yaoshua was harsh, but she kept her volume down, so as not to wake Su Xiaoning up. "Princess, don't blame me for being meddlesome. You will definitely be a golden core in the future, and you will have a lifespan of 500 years. While he is just a mortal and his lifespan is only about 100 years. It is not practical to choose him as your Dao partner." Dai Su continued. Ji Yaoshua's expression darkened, asking all of a sudden, "Did my father say anything to you?" "No, nothing." Dai Su paused momentarily before he quickly denied. Ji Yaoshua clenched her fists in silence, saying in a cold voice, "Dai Su, let me warn you. Don't you dare to do anything to Su Zimo or the Su family." Dai Su's expression hardened, but he remained silent. After a brief silence, Ji Yaoshua sighed softly, feeling upset. 100 years will pass by in the blink of an eye. I am afraid that I will never have the chance to see him again. Upon hearing this, Dai Su breathed a sigh of relief, finally putting his heart at rest. Ji Yaoshua had finally realized that if she and Su Zimo were on close terms, it would not be helpful to Su Zimo. Instead, it would bring disaster to him. Ji Yaoshua looked forlorn. She did not notice that Su Xiaoning, who was in her embrace, batted her eyelashes but did not open her eyes. Pingyang Town. Su Hong and others were about to return to the capital with the army of the country of Yin. "Zimo, why don't you stay in the capital with me for a period of time?" Now that Su Hong was going to the capital, he would not be returning to Pingyang Town anytime soon. He was worried at leaving Su Zimo behind by himself. "Brother, you should go now. I will stay in Pingyang Town for a while before I embark upon an adventure." "You don't have to worry about me," Su Zimo said. Su Hong frowned. "There is no one at the Su family's residence, and we don't have any acquaintances in Pingyang Town. You are by yourself?" "I am not alone." Su Zimo smiled. "MMM?" Su Hong was surprised. Su Zimo did not explain. Instead, he gave Su Hong a pound on the chest, smiling. "You should hurry to the capital now. There is no need to worry about me. If there's a chance, I will go to the capital to visit all of you." "All right, we will leave now." Su Hong mounted the horse and nodded towards Su Zimo. Under the protection of the country of Yan's army, Su Hong and the others of the Su family left for the capital, galloping away. The cold wind howled. Su Zimo walked on the empty long street amidst the wind and snow, looking lonely and desolate from the back. Xiaoning had left, so had Su Hong. Everyone seemed to have left him within a day. When Su Zimo reached his own mansion and he pushed the door open, the wind and snow seemed to have stopped and he could feel a sense of warmth rushing toward him. There seemed to be a lady in a bloody red robe standing under the peach blossom tree. It seemed real and yet ethereal as she turned to smile at him. Su Zimo was not alone, and he did not feel lonely. When he came back to his mansion, it was as if Dai Yu was by his side, watching him cultivate as usual, kicking and beating him occasionally. Su Zimo smiled and closed the door. Su Zimo had no intention of leaving Pingyang Town right away. He was waiting. He was waiting for someone. Just like that night 1.5 years ago. Chapter 57. The Wine to Send Him on His Way. Chapter 57. The Wine to Send Him on His Way. Winter had passed and spring was here. 2 years ago, perfected Song Lang inadvertently passed by Pingyang Town and brought 2 people away with him, and that directly or indirectly changed the fate of many people. Zhou Dingyuan was one of them. During the 2 years of cultivation in Iridescent Cloud's palace, Zhou Dingyuan often thought to himself that without perfected Song Lang, he would still be at the prison in Pingyang Town, munching on the cold buns, drinking the icy water, trying hard to please the prison guards. But right now, Zhou Dingyuan was a Qi refinement warrior. He was a disciple of Iridescent Cloud's palace. Although he was an outer sect disciple, whenever Zhou Dingyuan went to the mortal world, he would be respected and envied by the surrounding mortals. He could decide the life and death of every mortal. Although he was an outer sect disciple, he wore the Taoist robe of Iridescent Cloud's palace. The cultivators from the small clans might have higher cultivation base, but they would show respect for him whenever they saw him. Zhou Dingyuan enjoyed this feeling very much. However, that was not enough. Whenever Zhou Dingyuan enjoyed the glory of being a Qi refinement warrior, a scene would flash through his mind automatically. There was no moon that night. He knelt in front of a green-robed scholar, tears on his face as he begged for mercy. This scene felt like a thorn that was stuck deeply in Zhou Dingyuan's throat. It had become increasingly intolerable and uncomfortable over the past 2 years. The higher Zhou Dingyuan's realm was, the more he could not forget the scene. No matter what achievements he had accomplished, it could not erase what happened that night, as well as the shame that the scholar brought him. After cultivation, Zhou Dingyuan knew very well that if he did not remove this thorn, it would become his mental demons in the future. The solution was simple. He would return to Pingyang Town to kill the scholar and annihilate his entire family clan. And right now, the time had come. Zhou Dingyuan had the Earth Spirit Root. He managed to reach level 8 Qi condensation within 2 years. His speed of cultivation was ranked the top few among other cultivators in his sect. Of course, Shun Mingqi, who joined the sect with him, had Heaven's Spirit Root. She had reached perfected Qi condensation and was only one step to breaking through Foundation Establishment Realm. There is definitely no way to defeat Senior Martial Sister Shin, but level 8 Qi condensation is enough. Hehe, I suppose there is no Qi refinement warrior in the entire Pingyang Town. Seeing that Pingyang Town was right before him, Zhou Dingyuan could feel his blood boiling. He could not help but laugh. In the eyes of the normal folks, there was nothing more proud and happy than a glorious homecoming. And right now, Zhou Dingyuan had done even better than a glorious homecoming by coming back as a Qi refinement warrior. Zhou Dingyuan was here not only to annihilate the Su family, but also to make Su Zimo kneel in front of him and to torture him viciously, as well as to reduce the prison of Pingyang Town to rubble, killing all the prison guards that used to humiliate him. By the way, Su Zimo's younger sister has good looks. I cannot kill her. Haha. Zhou Dingyuan smiled with a lecherous grin. By the time Zhou Dingyuan reached Pingyang Town, it was already midnight. It was a dark and gusty night. It was no different from that night 2 years ago. There was no one on the empty street. Zhou Dingyuan maneuvered his flying sword to reach Su Zimo's mansion. Zhou Dingyuan felt deeply about the familiar mansion. 2 years ago, when he was here to assassinate Su Zimo, he had to climb over the wall carefully to get into the mansion. Right now, he could be open about going into the mansion. To put it more accurately, he could fly into the mansion. He wondered how Su Zimo would react when he saw him execute sword kinesis flight. Would he be scared stiff? Would he kneel down right away, kowtowing to him, begging him for mercy? Zhou Dingyuan was full of anticipation. Zhou Dingyuan came to the courtyard and looked around. It was no different from how it was 2 years ago. It was the beginning of spring. The peach blossom tree at the courtyard looked the same. The flowers had blossomed, and the petals had fallen to the ground. The only change was that there were a sanguine bough and a long saber on the stone table under the peach blossom tree. There was a squeaking sound. The door to one of the rooms in the courtyard opened and out came a green-robed scholar. The green-robed scholar carried a jar of wine, looked calm and composed. He went to the stone table in the courtyard and took a seat casually, pouring 2 bowls of wine. He looked at Zhou Dingyun, who was in midair, as he said calmly, "Come down. I will treat you to a drink." Zhou Dingyun was stunned. He had thought of all kinds of possibilities when they met, but the scene in front of him was totally beyond his expectation. There was no shock. There was no fear. There was no pleading for mercy. There was nothing at all. The green-robed scholar looked calm and indifferent, making Zhou Dingyun even more eager to kill him. "What's with the pretense?" Zhou Dingyun sneered. He had done a check on Su Zimo. He had no spirit chi. This meant that 2 years had passed and Su Zimo was still immortal. Zhou Dingyun was fearless as he descended into the courtyard, coming up to the stone table, asking all of a sudden, "You seem to have known all along that I will be back. Is that so?" "Yes." Su Zimo nodded. "When I let you off 2 years ago, I knew that you would return." "Haha, scholars are indeed smart." Zhou Dingyun broke out into laughter. There was mockery in his eyes, but he changed his tone right then. "However, your so-called wits seem childish to me." Zhou Dingyun had been observing Su Zimo. He was hoping to sense something from his expression. But Zhou Dingyun was disappointed. Su Zimo looked at him calmly. His eyes were clear, and there was not even the slightest bit of fluctuation in his mood. Zhou Dingyun smiled dryly. "Fate is so amazing. No one would have imagined that the ruffian from Pingyang Town 2 years ago would become a chi refinement warrior and underwent such huge changes. Oh, by the way, do you know what is a chi refinement warrior?" Zhou Dingyun looked at Su Zimo with provocation in his eyes. Su Zimo sighed softly with emotion as he nodded. "Yes, the changes are tremendous. Do you know why I chose this time to come back?" Zhou Dingyun asked with a raised eyebrow. "Why? 2 years ago, right here, at a night like this during the same season. It's the 2 of us as well, but..." Zhou Dingyun no longer hid his murderous intent in his eyes, as he said coldly, "The outcome tonight will be vastly different from that night 2 years. Su Zimo smiled and suddenly pushed the wine bowl toward Zhou Dingyun. He nodded and said, "Take a drink." "MMM?" Zhou Dingyun was on alert. He could not understand why Su Zimo was so calm and composed. At the sight of the bowl of wine in front of him, a thought flashed in Zhou Dingyun's mind. He could not help but sneer. "Second young Master Su, I suppose there is something about the wine? So this is what you are counting on. Hee hee, it's a pity that I have seen through it." Zhou Dingyun thought that Su Zimo had poisoned the wine and was in a hurry for him to drink the wine. "There is nothing with the wine, but there is indeed something with the name of the wine." Su Zimo shook his head. "What is it?" Zhou Dingyun asked automatically. "This the wine to send you on your way." Su Zimo raised his head to look at Zhou Dingyun as he said calmly, "After drinking this bowl of wine, I will send you on your way." Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun could feel the chills on his back. The glance that Su Zimo gave him reminded him of that night 2 years ago. Chapter 58, Pierced Through the Heart by Countless Arrows. Chapter 58, Pierced Through the Heart by Countless Arrows. Zhou Dingyun seemed to have gotten a big shock. He jumped up, retreated a few steps, reaching his palm toward the storage bag at his waist. He narrowed his eyes and looked solemn. Calm down, Zhou Dingyun assured himself. "I am a level 8 chi refinement warrior. I underwent a total transformation and am no longer the same person 2 years ago. I will never be frightened by a scholar. Su Zimo is a mere mortal. What could he count on? Aren't you going to drink?" Su Zimo smiled, shaking his head. "If you don't drink, you won't have the chance anymore. You are bluffing." Zhou Dingyun gave a loud shout. He slapped his palm on the storage bag, maneuvering a flying sword, shooting out a ray of spirit chi from his fingertip. The flying sword shone brightly. Inferior grade spirit weapon. Chi. Zhou Dingyun had the flying sword in his hand. He calmed himself and pointed forward. Right then, the flying sword turned into a ray of light, reaching Su Zimo within seconds. Su Zimo did not move a single inch. He seemed like a monk who was in meditation. The flying sword was right in front of Su Zimo's glabella. It would pierce into it if it went 1 inch further. However, Su Zimo maintained his composure, and he did not bat his eyelids at all. Zhou Dingyun thought that Su Zimo must be scared stiff. He could not help but grin hideously. Su Zimo, if you kneel down to beg me for mercy, I can consider not killing you. I think you have gotten something very wrong here. Su Zimo stretched out his palm, gently holding the flying sword in front of him as he said calmly, "It is the same place, the same season, the same night, and the two of us, but there will not be too much of a difference in the outcome." There was a look of malice in Zhou Dingyun's eyes, as he saw how Su Zimo used his palm to grab hold of the sharp inferior-grade spirit weapon. What a fool. Su Zimo continued. If there are any changes, it would be that 2 years ago I let you off, but today, you won't be able to leave. Damn, how dare you speak conceited nonsense. I will maim one of your palms first. Zhou Dingyun yelled, ruthlessness in his eyes. He maneuvered the flying sword, exerting force for it to spin. In the meantime, Su Zimo's palm wrapped and hit the sword. Pa! There was a sound as loud as thunder. Zhou Dingyun was given a shock. It was not the flying flesh and spurting blood that he was expecting. Instead, Su Zimo's palm was intact. Zhou Dingyun was even more surprised that he had lost control of the flying sword. How could this be? The next moment, Zhou Dingyun turned from shock to aghast at the sight that he witnessed. Su Zimo spread his palm, and the flying sword lay quietly on his palm. It was covered with cracks. Su Zimo released his hand, and the inferior-grade spirit weapon turned into fragments, scattering onto the ground. An inferior-grade spirit weapon was deemed useless. Zhou Dingyun stared at Su Zimo, whose eyes had gradually turned cold. His heart sank deeply to the bottom as well. He finally realized that 2 years had passed, and he had become a level 8 Chi refinement warrior. But second young Master Su, who was in front of him, was no longer the frail scholar back then. He suddenly realized that when Su Zimo said that everything had changed tremendously just now, Su Zimo was not referring to him, but to Su Zimo himself. The bowl of wine on the round table was really meant to send him on his way. But Zhou Dingyun still could not figure out why Su Zimo could shatter his inferior-grade spirit weapon with his blood and flesh. Zhou Dingyun did not wish to find out the reason. Right now, his only thought was to leave this place and try his best to steer clear of Su Zimo. Zhou Dingyun took out a flying sword from his storage bag. This was a pseudo-spirit weapon. It was already unimaginable for outer sect disciples to receive inferior-grade spirit weapons in Iridescent Cloud's palace. However, it had been shattered by Su Zimo's palm. Zhou Dingyun stepped onto the flying sword, rose into the air, and flew out of the mansion. Before he left, Zhou Dingyun could not help but look back. Su Zimo was not in a hurry to get up. He drank the bowl of strong wine on the stone table unhurriedly before he stood up, tied the long saber to his waist, carried the quiver on his back, and took the sanguine bow in his hands. Zhou Dingyun swallowed his saliva, feeling nervous. He turned and used all his energy to maneuver the flying sword, speeding toward the far distance. The wind howled in his ears. Zhou Dingyun could not help but shiver as the wind blew at him. He did not know since when he broke out in cold sweats. Zhou Dingyun left Pingyang town in no time. The Zhonglang mountain range was not far in the distance. It was pitch dark, and he could vaguely hear growling sounds made by the spirit beasts. Zhou Dingyun let out a long breath, putting his heart at rest. Right then, Zhou Dingyun heard a cold voice coming from behind him. Do you still remember the vow you made on that night 2 years ago when you knelt down to beg for mercy? Zhou Dingyun was terror-stricken upon hearing this. He almost lost control of the flying sword, causing him to lose his balance and almost fall off from midair. Su Zimo. This was Su Zimo's voice. How was that possible? How did he manage to catch up? Zhou Dingyun's face was as white as a sheet, breaking out in cold sweats. He tried all his best to maneuver the flying sword to speed forward while he looked backward. Su Zimo was right behind him. He looked calm, as if he was just casually walking. However, every stride that he took was as far as 20 to 30 feet. He is not using his full force. At the thought of this, Zhou Dingyun seemed to have descended into an icehouse. He felt chills all over his body. Su Zimo's voice was heard again. On that night 2 years ago, you swore that even if you were lucky enough to join the immortal sect, you would never seek revenge on me. If not, you will suffer a painful death where countless of arrows pierce through your heart. Well, since that was the case, you will get what you wished for. Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun finally understood what the sanguine bow on the round table was meant for. Don't. Zhou Dingyun turned around quickly. He had just uttered a word, and he was shrouded by a black shadow in front of him. Hoo. Dozens of arrows pierced through the air one after another. Poof. Zhou Dingyun felt pain in his chest. It was as if he had lost something in his body. He felt weak all over, and he dropped from midair. Zhou Dingyun made a loud thumping sound as he flopped down onto the ground. He was covered with mud, and the ground that he lay on had turned blood red. Zhou Dingyun lowered his head to look at his chest. It was a bloody mess. There was a bloody hollow as large as a bowl on his chest. His heart was pierced through and shot away by dozens of sharp arrows. Pierced through the heart by countless arrows. Everything seemed to be fated and predestined. There was a breeze in the air. Zhou Dingyun could see a corner of the fluttering green robe in front of him. Zhou Dingyun lay on the ground, looking up at Su Zimo, who stood in front of him. There was a strange smile on his face as he spoke, but his words were indistinct. I am iridescent clouds. Palace, since you killed me, you won't be able to escape. One day, perfected Songlang will come looking for you. Su Zimo squatted down and smiled. I will go look for him before that day comes. You will be the first to go. Perfected Songlang will be next in line. Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun's head dropped to his side as he took his last breath. Su Zimo pulled the storage bag from Zhou Dingyun's waist and kept it. He then grabbed his corpse, took a few steps forward before he threw it directly into Songlang mountain range. It would not take a day before Zhou Dingyun's corpse was devoured by the spirit beasts. This was getting rid of the corpse to destroy the evidence of one's crime. No one would know what happened tonight. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.